This is the era of the struggle of good and evil, the era of the battle of people and ferocious beasts. Everyone wants to enter the University of Martial Arts and become the strongest person defending the world. And he, Su Lai, has always been a candidate for the role of this strongest person. The young man was popular with girls who knew him as the number one of their class. They boasted of his appearance. Su Lai didn't even expect that before the high school entrance exams, he would encounter unforeseen incidents. The black-haired youth was perfecting Kai. Here he has overcome the 10th level, here is the 90th. He has already overcome the 1000th level, and then passed the 9999th level. Su Lai didn't understand why he had already passed 10,000 levels of Kai cultivation, but still couldn't lay the foundation. The Kai purification, as shown by his bracelet, had reached 9,999 levels and exceeded the limits of the control dimension. Out of the entire school, he was the only one left in the process of Kai purification. The girl who tracked the young man's indicators said that the main classes are mostly already at the stage of forming the foundation. Once considered the strongest, it can become garbage for society overnight. Once defeated by Su Lai, people laughed at him and said that no one could imagine that their number one, before the entrance exams, would become garbage. Su Lai heard remarks from everywhere that he was still at the stage of Kai purification. Some doubted that there was any benefit to them in being at the stage of laying the foundation. However, the arrival of evil forces always takes you by surprise. People have a new danger. The school where Su Lai studied received information that there are suspicions that followers of the Order of Ermengarde are operating in their city. Ermengarde is a sea serpent from Scandinavian mythology, the third son of Loki and the giantess Angrboda. Code Red was announced. Everyone should prepare for the first level of danger. An unknown danger was approaching. Here, a woman was undergoing medical treatment, lying in a small crater. She and the medics were surrounded by school students. It is said that the lower creatures will never be able to overcome the higher ones, and this is the rule of the world. But Su Lai doesn't believe it. He fights with creatures. It was because he had gone through 10,000 levels of Kai cultivation. Wuji City, Kaiyuan High School. Recreation Room 025. A blue glow could be seen from behind the doors of the room. The young man in the room was doing push-ups, and a blue aura was flowing from his hands. The young man counted to 100 push-ups, and then got to his feet. He had a toned body, black hair, and the same color eyes. He said out loud that on that day he would finish the exercises with push-ups that he had done earlier. The young man decided to try something again, hoping that something would change. A blue-colored aura began to form on his arm. The bracelet on his arm announced that the cultivation of Kai had been discovered by student Su Lai, that youth. Statistics management has begun. From the bracelet came the calculation of the levels of Kai improvement. Here the 10th level was overcome, then the 90th, then the 1000th, at which Su Lai was already tense. But, nevertheless, the bracelet continued counting, and reached the number of 9,999 levels. The bracelet announced that this number is the limit of the control measurement of Kai purification levels. After that, one by one, error notifications began to appear. A whirlwind rose around Su Lai, and a blue aura enveloped her hand. The young man exclaimed that it was happening again. Namely, there was an explosion. Su Lai's outer clothes were torn to shreds. He covered his eyes with one hand, closing them, and put the other on his hips. He said out loud that there had been an explosion again. Su Lai peeked at his palm, which contained a broken electronic bracelet sparkling with lightning. The young man noted aloud that unless after the 10th level it is possible to continue laying the foundation. But he was already at the 9,999th level. For him, the question was whether the bracelet was a marriage or a fake. But then someone called Su Lai by name, while shouting that for what reason the young man was practicing in the room, and also clarified about the explosion. After that, a demand was made from this person to open the door, as Su Lai's time for privacy was over. Su Lai agreed, addressing the man as the headman Lu Xing. After that, he went to the door and opened it. Behind this door stood a girl in a school uniform resembling a sailor. She had long brown hair gathered in 2 low ponytails, and her eyes were brown. In her hands, the girl who was Lu Xing was holding a tablet and a pen. Lu Xing began to scold Su Lai, saying that many times other students complained to the teacher about him. She asked the young man if he knew how many she had stood up to for him this month. If it hadn't been for her, after the explosion, everything would have ended in the shelter. The girl, after these words, went into a room in which a fire was burning in places and smoke was billowing. Lu Xing was struck by the amount of damage in the room. She waved her hand in front of her face, driving the smoke away from her nose, and asked Su Lai about what he was practicing in the room. The young man, covering his eyes with one hand, replied that the device for determining the level was exploding for the 5th time. Lu Xing prepared to write something down on a piece of paper attached to the tablet, while asking the young man what stage he had reached in his cultivation. On this, she received that Su Lai is at the stage of Kai purification. The girl was surprised by this, because everyone else had already moved to the stage of laying the foundation. Su Lai was only at the stage of purification, which she told the young man about. After these words, she asked him about the level that he was able to achieve. Su Lai replied to Lu Xing that he had reached the 10,000th level. The girl with a smile told him that he did not even know how to lie, because all beginners know that there are only 10 levels at the stage of Kai purification, and the laying stage is already higher. Lu Xing marked Su Lai's level on a piece of paper. Besides him, there were other people there, as well as the girl herself. The young man himself stood and was silent at this moment. Lu Xing also told him that he himself knows that they all need this solitude to get into a good university. The girl reminded Su Lai that the entrance exam to the martial arts university will be held next month, and only students who have passed the foundation stage can register for the entrance exam. Lu Xing became sad, and then said that in the other classes, almost everyone has already moved to the laying stage. But while they are under protection, the number of monsters outside the school is growing every day. Their number has doubled since last year. According to experts, people are returning to the famine period, and this time it will last at least 50 years. As soon as this period comes, the monsters will only become more ferocious, and their number will only grow. Lu Xing has a fear that it will be difficult to cope with the current group of warriors alone. Therefore, starting with the entrance exams at their school, students until the moment of admission to the university, they will have twice as many resources as before, and the study time at the university will be reduced to 3 years. Applying to the martial arts university has become even more difficult this time. The girl informed Su Lai about all this. Closing his eyes, the young man replied that he understood everything, and also told Lu Xing that if she had nothing more to say, then she could go. With a displeased face, the girl turned around and then walked out of the room. Su Lai angrily punched the wall, while saying that he only had a month left. If he can't go to the foundation stage, then he definitely won't be able to enter the martial arts university. But then a notification came to the young man's phone. Keeping one hand on the wall, he took the smartphone in the other and looked at the messages that came to him from Lu Xing. The girl wrote to Su Lai that she had sent him a link to the martial arts forum. The teacher told her that if there is something that the young man does not understand, then you can look there. The second message was a link to the website of the martial arts forum. Su Lai followed the link and posted a post where he wrote that he was looking for solutions, because everyone else had moved to the stage of laying the foundation after the 10th level, and he was already at the 10,000th level of Kai purification. He was asking about the reason why he still can't move on to the next stage. He asks for help with this issue, as well as to dispel his doubts. Below his post there was another one where a foundation teacher would help with practice. 10 minutes later, his post had only 6 views and 0 reactions. The young man was sitting against the wall in the same place and was dissatisfied, because his post is generally a sensation. Su Lai assumed that he might be the only one in the world who faced this problem. Until now, when you reach the 10th level in the stage of Kai purification, the foundation is automatically created. This is the current law of the cultivation world, and it cannot be changed, so there must be something wrong with his situation. Su Lai dropped the phone from his hand and, still holding one hand on the wall, buried his head against the wall and put the other hand on his chest. He felt that the aura in his body was really strengthening, but it was not concentrated at one point. It seemed to flow throughout his body. The young man wondered if such a thing was possible. He even called himself a colander. The loudspeaker announced that the teachers and students of the school would gather in 30 minutes at the martial arts stadium for a meeting. All the people in the school ran to the gathering place. A large young man was running up the stairs, telling others to make way for him. He shouted that Uncle Ben was only at 10% of his leg strength, and they couldn't keep up with him anymore. If they want to be admitted to martial arts classes, they have to work hard. At some point, this young man overtook Su Lai and then stood in front of him. He had a large build, brown hair and brown eyes, and he was taller than Su Lai by 2 heads. That young man pointed his finger at Su Lai and asked if it wasn't the former first place, calling him by name. Also, he said that Su Lai looks shabby, but Su Lai was not at a loss and with a smile, remembering, asked the name of that big guy. The young man assumed that his name was Zhao Sha, which meant stupid. That made him angry, and he shouted to Su Lai that his name was Jutao and let him remember it. Su Lai asked Wu, as he called him, Zhu Sha, what he wanted from him. At the same time, the young man asked Jutao what was not enough for him last time, recalling the picture of how he sat on him and, holding the collar of his t-shirt, hit him in the face. One of the people watching their exchange said that this week, Jutao was constantly looking for Sulai to compete, but every time he lost. Jutao was called thick-skinned. The whispering girls assumed that he was a masochist. Jutao was furious, but then his henchman told him that he had spied on the privacy report. Sulai was still at the stage of Kai purification. Jutao thought at that moment, noting Sulai's level, that they would see how arrogant he was now. The big young man laughed at Sulai and told him that hardly anyone could have imagined that their number one, before the entrance exam, would become worthless. Continuing, he said that he could not even build a foundation for laying the foundation. He, according to Jutao, will be crushed at the moment by a person who is at the third level of laying the foundation. Sulai was surprised that he was able to move from the purification stage to the third level of the laying stage in a month. Others were surprised that Sulai was in the stage of Kai purification. They did not believe that this was possible. It seems that Jutao will win this time, because everyone knows that the purification stage will never be able to defeat the laying stage. With a smirk, Jutao told Sulai that the strong always wins over the weak. These are the rules of their world. He remembered how one of the teachers told him to keep trying, and then, maybe in a few years, he would catch up with Sulai. Then he was visited by memories of how Jutao, standing with a bouquet of scarlet roses, was rejected by a girl who then apologized and told him that she liked Sulai better. Jutao grabbed Sulai by the breasts and furiously started telling him that he was ignored by the teachers. He was rejected by a girl he liked, and it was all because of the young man. Because of him, he suffered all this time. To this, Sulai told him that it was all because, maybe it was all because he himself had been trying badly all this time. After that, he asked Jutao, while pushing his hand away from him, what does he have to do with it at all? This angered Jutao even more. After that, he embraced himself with flames and raised his fist to strike with the words that Sulai prayed that he would not see Uncle Ben again in his next life. Sulai covered himself with a completely blue aura and thought that this was the third level of the laying stage. It's powerful. At the same time, the young man clenched his hands into fists and raised them at chest level in a pose for defense and attack at the same time. When Jutao almost flew up to Sulai, his eyes opened in surprise, and after that, he flew against the wall, crashing into it, and screamed that he was in pain. His henchmen were surprised by this, so they immediately ran up to him and began to clarify whether he was okay. Sulai himself did not understand what had happened, because others said that the purification stage could never surpass the laying stage. The young man wondered about the reason why Jutao flew to the wall. Here, the girls said that this is the strength of their number one, because even at the stage of purification, he was able to defeat a person at the stage of laying. The young man turned around, throwing on his hood, and walked in the other direction from them. One of Jutao's henchmen told him that he had treated the man badly and was running away, and also warned Sulai that he would go to the teacher and report everything to him. Another henchman added that there were witnesses around. Sulai stopped and smilingly asked the other students if they had seen how badly he had treated Jutao. They said that he flew away by himself, because how can the purification stage defeat the laying stage? Perhaps Jutao himself hit and flew away. The young man went on, smiling and closing his eyes. Sulai decided for himself that to begin with, he would go to the gathering, and then maybe the teacher would answer his questions. Jutao was leaning over at that moment, and he was sick. There were already some people at the gathering place and sometimes birds were flying. Sulai walked along the blue glowing road to the same color portal. A loudspeaker hovered next to him, wishing Sulai a successful completion of the entrance exams, and also told them to try together in the future. Sulai at that moment thought that if the problem with the laying stage was not solved, it was unlikely that he would be able to enroll. After that, the young man found himself on the training ground of Kaiyuan High School. This was the 100th admission ceremony of the Kaiyuan school. Someone said that Sulai had finally come. The young man greeted a large teacher with glasses. This teacher was the supervisor of the third group of the third year of high school, Sun Huade. He asked Sulai how the month of seclusion had gone. The young man answered him that he had encountered a small problem. The teacher adjusted his glasses and said he would look at his progress during this time. After that, Sun Huade approached Sulai, and then a blue-colored aura appeared around the two of them and a small wind rose. The teacher was surprised, and his hair, which was located on his head on the sides of the bald spot. The man at this moment was thinking that breathing is very dense. Not that he, but even the director is not able to do such an elementary thing at this level. He wondered why Su Lai was still in the purification stage. Sun Huid was still standing with shaggy hair, and Su Lai at that moment said that he had heard about a major breakthrough in technology that had recently occurred, so he asked him if the teacher would like to try to save his hair. The teacher slapped the young man in the face with a notebook and told him that, instead of worrying about him, it was better to let him worry about himself first. The martial arts university has already met the students of the school, but there is only a month left before the exams begin. At the moment, Su Lai has to overcome the stage of purification within 1 month and go to the stage of laying. Otherwise, the young man will have to change his specialty, which Sun Huid warned him about. Also, the teacher said that Su Lai doesn't need to worry so much, because everything will settle by itself. After all, his future won't end at school. Sun Huid put his hand on the young man's shoulder and informed him that as soon as he was more collected, the trial of the kingdom would begin. Su Lai can leave by himself, saying any reason, because they don't know his cultivation base. He doesn't need to tell them either. The young man wanted to say something to this, but was interrupted by the teacher, who said that he knew that Su Lai would not give up so easily. After these words, Sun Huid asked him what level of Kai purification the young man was at. Su Lai replied that he was at the 10,000th level. The teacher was amazed and asked again about his level, but then they were interrupted by a scream and something falling on the training ground, and after that, a cloud of dust rose there. Someone shouted, asking for quick help to the wounded man. Sun Huid and Su Lai ran in that direction. A black-haired woman with glasses and torn clothes was lying in a small crater. Sun Huid began to treat this woman on his own, and the medics with a stretcher had already approached them. Meanwhile, the teacher said that the woman has a very serious injury. The injury was probably inflicted by someone at the peak of the laying stage. These words surprised Su Lai, and he asked the man about it. Something flashed in the sky and the students who saw it called others to turn their attention to it. It was the headmaster of the school, as the students said. One man yawned and then said he was terribly tired. This man was a school security guard, and his colleague, also a security guard, was sitting not far from him. The guard who yawned was sitting with his back leaning against the window and said that he had not slept last night, and therefore then asked another to monitor the situation for him while he took a nap. The second one, in response to his words, reminded him with displeasure that they currently have working hours, for which the guard who did not get enough sleep told him not to worry, because the strongest gathered at Kaiyuan High School. It is unlikely that something will happen. After these words, he sprawled on a chair, covered his eyes with his cap and got ready to sleep. But behind the glass that was behind him, 5 people appeared. In front of these people stood a tall, beefy blonde man with a scar running through his forehead and left eye. On the sides of the blonde, 2 young men stood and smiled, looking at the resting guard, and behind them, there were 2 more, a man with glasses and a guy. Another guard asked them if they were students of the school, because he had not seen them before, and then asked them to show their student cards. The blonde-haired man smiled, clenching his teeth tightly. After that, the man broke through the wall in which there was a window, and his self. Then he grabbed the sitting guard, pinning him to the floor, saying that apparently he was not taught that strength is a ticket to any place. The man's eyes completely turned red and began to glow. The second guard, trembling with fear, tried to reach the radio and thought that this was a bad situation, so we need to report it faster. And the first guard at that moment was hanging like a rag doll, grabbed by the blonde man's head. But then, the guy who was standing next to him before the attack on the guards came into the room after the man. His eyes were the same as the blonde's. The guy was smiling and throwing a small stone with his hand. This guy threw a pebble with superhuman strength into the head of the guard who tried to ask for help through the radio. A puddle of blood splashed, and the guard's hand froze a few centimeters from the radio. The intruders went on with smiles, leaving behind the bodies of the guards. The students of the school stared in amazement at the appearance of the director. They talked about the fact that the ability to fly on a golden sword can only be achieved after reaching the golden pill. The principal of the Kaiyuan school is an elderly man with long gray hair and a thick gray mustache. He was dressed in a pantsuit, an elongated jacket, and a white scarf were draped over his shoulders. The man's name is Wu Defa. This is the principal of the Kaiyuan school. The disciples, looking at him, hoped that they would be able to reach the golden pill as quickly as possible. The director arrived standing on a golden sword. The woman who landed in the crater regained consciousness and barely said anything about Ermengarde at death. Then she lost consciousness again. The director of the school told the doctors to help the woman first. Also, he announced that the 100th test ceremony in honor of admission to the University of Martial Arts has been suspended. The students were amazed by this, and they began to talk that something serious must have happened, since the ceremony was interrupted, because this has not been done since the founding of the Kaiyuan school. They hoped it wouldn't affect their entrance exams. The director went to the center of the arena, and then loudly asked the students to behave more restrained. After that, Jutao announced that the school had just received news that the Ermengarde order operating in the city was involved in the incident. In order to ensure safety, the school restricts access to a free exit from the school, so the director asked them not to be heroic. Also, Jutao said that each curator should ensure the safety of students. It is necessary to follow all instructions in an organized manner. The students were shocked by his announcement about the guilt of the Ermengarde order. After that, some began to run away from the arena, while saying that this is the same order that will even go over their heads just to get their way. The disciples have heard that the order does not hesitate to get rid of cultivators, so they are afraid. For everyone, the reason for the appearance of the Ermengarde order in the city of Wuji was unclear, hoping that everything would be fine with them. Someone in this stream stopped Sulai by grabbing his arm. He turned around and saw Lu Xing. The girl was smiling and pulling the young man somewhere. The young man asked where she was going. She turned around and told Sulai that it was related to his entrance exams. After a while, they found themselves in a small garden. Lu Xing told the young man that such an opportunity comes only once in a lifetime. Sulai also asked what kind of opportunity we are talking about. Lu Xing started talking about the fact that a reward has been announced for the mission in Wuji City, and the whole thing is that Ermengarde is planning to invade their school. She was holding some paper that was rolled up into a tube. She also told Sulai that if he caught the people from Ermengarde, then the martial arts university would definitely see his strength, and they would definitely accept the young man. In her hands she was holding an already unfolded piece of paper. It was written about the world search, namely, the Order of Ermengarde is wanted. Below this inscription were depicted 5 people, 5 men. They were all united by a tattoo in the form of a snake in the shape of an 8, passing from the neck to the shoulder and collarbone, and located on the left side. Under their portraits there was an inscription about the reward, namely, that 1 million was due. Sulai asked the girl how she found out about this information. Lu Xing replied that her parents are law enforcement officers. They told her to be more observant. She also told him not to worry, because she would find people who could help him. Approaching him, Lu Xing whispered in his ear that they would share the reward equally, so everyone would be in the black, because, besides, Sulai would definitely be able to enroll in the University of Martial Arts. At that moment, both were confused. The young man threw the paper aside and told the girl that he wouldn't go, so he just wanted to go back to the dorm. At this moment, he was thinking that he was still at the stage of Kai purification. If he goes to fight with such murderers, he will certainly die, because he does not look like a stupid person. Lu Xing was unhappy with his answer, because, as she said, it was merciful on her part, but he does not appreciate the kindness of the girl at all. At the same time, she stamped her foot with displeasure and called him an idiot. Some student called Teacher Sun and notified him that there were problems. Teacher Sun Huade ran up to that student, asking him about what had happened. This student was Jutao's ward. He said that Sulai and Jutao had an argument. Several ribs were broken. They vomited blood. In general, they were left without strength. The teacher asked him if they had been helped, and then asked him to take him there. The young man agreed, and at that moment Sun Huade thought that Sulai was still purifying her Kai, so she was clearly not Jutao's equal. After that, Sun Huade summoned his power, enveloped himself in a blue vortex, grabbed Jutao's ward, and they rushed with the help of his forces in that direction. Men's dormitory, 3rd-year building of Kaiyuan High School. The dormitory was a tall gray building, similar to a residential building. The man with the scar said about the current mission, namely, that within 24 hours it is necessary to kill the observer for the entrance exams of the Kaiyuan Huang Healo School. This was said by a man named Aoma. He was among the wanted. There were others with him, namely, a man in black round glasses, Ma Jixing, a brown-haired guy, Wang Qi, a short red-haired young man, Xin Guang, a guy with long purple hair, Liang Yangwei. Aoma threw his arms over the shoulders of Ma Jixing and Wang Qi, leaning on them, and said that the men's dormitory was a good place for them to hide, because the school teachers would definitely not think of looking for them in this place. Basically, they are the only ones responsible for this mission, judging by their cultivation base. Even if they stumble upon 5 or 6 teachers, they will still easily deal with them, and accordingly, the observer is in their teeth. The blonde man told them about all this. Aoma squeezed Wang He's neck with his hand and said that if the situation from the past repeats and they let someone leave, the consequences for them will be severe. Then he told the others to take action. Ma Jixang and Xin Guang jumped onto the ceiling and moved forward on it. Wang He and Liang Yonghui ran forward on the floor, and Ao Ma remained standing in place, smiling triumphantly, and with his hands on his hips. Su Lai was sitting in his room. Then a notification came to his phone. It was a new comment on his post. The young man suggested that his post is becoming more popular because comments are already being typed. He was greeted by another young man who introduced himself as Meng Hui. He was with a basic level of cultivation. The young man wrote that he does not think about the possibility of being at the 10,000th level of purification of Kai Su Lai, which he is talking about. Meng Hui lived in the Martial Arts University dormitory and lived in room 101. He had dark blue hair, almost black in color, and also, he wore glasses. Meng Hui was communicating on the forum via a computer. Su Lai texted him that it was true. To this, he received the answer that first of all, he should understand that after reaching the 10th level of Kai purification, regardless of what skills he has, he, in any case, forms the basis for cultivation. Also, Meng Hui wrote that if Su Lai really has a 10,000th level, as he says, then he must have inexhaustible energy. Su Lai also thought that if this is true, then it turns out that he has a very large reserve of energy. He can be invincible. Meng Hui also wrote that he, nevertheless, offers to check the reliability of the device with which the measurements are carried out. He himself was laughing at the young man at that moment and thinking about why he should respond to such messages. For him, the current applicants are somehow inadequate. His gaze was arrogant. Su Lai, after this communication, put the phone on the table with the screen down and thought that he didn't care as no one believed him. Su Lai left his room at number 521. Walking down the corridor, he noticed that it was somehow too quiet. The young man decided to go to a safe place in case the Order of Ermengarde shows up. At that moment, he saw Wang He walking down the corridor. The guy at that moment thought that maybe there should still be people in the dorm at that time. After that, thinking who Su Lai was, the young man himself was trying to figure out who the guy he met was. It seems to him that he has not seen him before. Wang He was glad that he was wearing a windbreaker from his school uniform. Otherwise, he would definitely have been caught. Su Lai didn't say anything, but he noticed that points should be deducted for wearing such a uniform. The guy at that moment abruptly remembered, covering the tattoo, that he had forgotten to cover it, so he assumed that the young man recognized him. After that, he asked Su Lai if he had seen her. Su Lai himself did not understand what he was talking about specifically, assuming that he wanted to quarrel with him, but did not understand why the guy was doing this. But, nevertheless, the young man agreed. Wang He smiled fiercely and took off his windbreaker with one hand. After that, the guy sat down a little, surrounding himself with a black and red aura, and his eyes became completely red. He said that in this case, he had no way out, so he would have to kill the young man. Su Lai was surprised by this, and Wang He rushed into the attack at that moment, while saying that he only has a level of Kai purification. If he collides with him, he will not be able to survive. Su Lai noticed the snake tattoo on Wang He's neck and wondered why this sign seemed so familiar to him. The image of wanted people that Lu Xing had shown him earlier immediately appeared in his mind. On one of them there was just a silhouette of Wang He. After that, the young man realized that he was from Ermengarde. Wang He was already raising his fist to strike at that moment. Su Lai was able to dodge the attack, but she was not stopped, and therefore, because of her, the wall behind the young man was destroyed. Su Lai turned around to look at the destroyed wall and thought that the guy must be at the peak of laying the foundation, and if he hits him, he may die. Wang He raised both hands above his head this time to attack, while squeezing them into a lock. He tried to attack the young man from behind, while thinking that Su Lai would not even be able to defend himself properly, so it's over for him. Su Lai's eyes lit up with a blue glow, and then he was completely surrounded by this light. It was this that stopped Wang He's attack, which shocked him and did not understand what had happened. Su Lai, declaring himself an aura, threw off Wang He. The guy did not understand what had happened. He wondered if the young man was really at the level of Kai purification. He had not seen such energy even among the representatives of the Golden Pill. The young man embraced himself with a blue aura. Wang He turned to Su Lai, while grabbing himself by the collar of his t-shirt, and then tore it off and said that how dare he behave like that, being at the level of Kai purification. This young man angered him. Wang He embraced himself with a fiery aura and began attacking the young man with the fist of the meteor lion. At the same time, he thought that this time he would definitely defeat the young man. Su Lai took his attack, protecting himself with an aura, and, with his hands folded in a defensive gesture, the young man understood that he could only defend himself. Wang He didn't understand what was going on, because he couldn't move and it seemed to him that his power was being absorbed by Su Lai. In addition, the guy was surrounded by the energy of a young man, and he thought that he had endless energy. Su Lai gathered energy in his fist, raised it to strike, and then attacked Wang He, who then flew to the wall, and the floor cracked around the young man himself. Su Lai was surprised by this. When he approached Wang He, he saw that he was lying unconscious, and there was his blood on the wall. Su Lai didn't understand what was wrong with Wang He. He walked back and forth in front of him and did not understand how he could defeat a man with the foundations laid. There must have been something wrong with that. The young man suggested that it could all be because of his large amount of energy. At the same time, he recalled the correspondence with Meng Hui about his endless supply of energy. Su Lai thought that besides, during the battle, Wang He's blood began to boil. If he took some medicine, then he could have had a myocardial infarction. The young man knocked the fist of his right hand against the palm of his left, saying at the same time that he was just lucky. Su Lai thought that it was better for him not to leave Wang He in the corridor, because his allies might find him there. Su Lai threw the hood of the windbreaker over his head, then grabbed Wang He by the hair and dragged him somewhere. Meanwhile, the academic building. Sun Huade and a disciple flew through the air on a blue sword from the teacher's power. Finally, they landed, finding themselves near Jutao sitting on the ground. There was a dent in the wall next to his back, and his henchman was sitting on the side. Sun Huade looked at this picture and could not understand what could cause such a destructive force. He took a round pill from the breast pocket of his vest. The teacher sat down in front of Jutao, fed him that pill and asked about what had happened. A green aura appeared around the young man, and his wounds began to heal. Jutao replied at that moment that he and Su Lai had had an argument. He didn't think that he would be so serious, and when Jutao realized everything, he was already slammed into the wall. Sun Huade did not understand how a person with the third stage of laying the foundations could suffer from the purification of Kai. After all, this is simply impossible. Jutao's henchmen started talking about how Su Lai was still at the Kai purification level. Then how could he defeat Jutao? They assumed that he must have resorted to dastardly methods. Therefore, the teacher must deal with him. Teacher Sun Huade thought that he has been teaching them for 3 years, so they probably think that he has not figured them out. For him, they are capable of more than that. Aloud, he told them that, to begin with, let them take Jutao to a safe place, and he would sort everything out for now. While Jutao and one of his subordinates, who was holding him, were leaving, the teacher watched them go, while the second subordinate bowed to Sun Huade and said goodbye to him. Then someone asked the teacher about what had happened. After that, he turned around and replied, waving his arms, that it was nothing, just a student skirmish. 2 people appeared to his gaze, namely, a woman with a curvy shape, with black hair in a square hairstyle and glasses. The woman was dressed in a white shirt and a tight black skirt, and she had a red bandage on her forearm. Next to her was a man of strong build, with black hair, dressed in a white shirt and black trousers, and on his face he had sunglasses. The woman told Teacher Sun that the director had upgraded the mission to the rank of the killers had reached the 3rd level of laying the foundations. Besides, they had deadly weapons with them, so she asked him to be careful. The teacher thought about this mission of rank. After all, in recent years, there have been few missions of this rank. Ermengan must have been well prepared, he supposed. Observation room. There were several tables in the room, near which there were computer chairs, and there were computers on the tables. Sun Huade was standing near one of these tables. He looked at the computer monitor and thought about Su Lai praying for the absence of a meeting with him in the next life. Also, he thought that Jutao was aware of Su Lai's problems. Besides, Jutao used to be number 2, it was some kind of imbalance. The teacher watched a video of Jutao and Su Lai fighting, namely the moment with Jutao throwing. Sun Huade was amazed that Su Lai had defeated a young man who was at the 3rd level of laying the foundations. He assumed about sudden blows. There is a sudden burst of energy, which leads to a critical energy value. There is a random impulse, thanks to which you can defeat an opponent in just 1 blow, whose rank is an order of magnitude higher than your own. But there are very few such cases. Cultivation levels, Kai purification, foundation laying, golden pill, union, transformation, return, deliverance, Mahayana, and disaster. Sun Huade turned off the computer. He began to think that Su Lai has good abilities, therefore it is necessary to help him with admission to the University of Martial Arts. At this moment, one of the Ermengarde order was moving along the ceiling above the teacher. It was Xin Guang. He had a dagger in his mouth. Sun Huade saw the gleam of a dagger in the computer monitor. When Xin Guang jumped with an attack on the teacher, Sun Huade formed an emerald-colored energy in his right hand, with which he put a shield on Xin Guang's attack. Thanks to this action, the dagger flew out of the guy's hands, and he himself was thrown away. When Xinguang landed on his feet, he told the teacher with a big smile that initially he just wanted to find some information in the observation room, and did not expect to meet someone in it. Sun Huade was angry because he saw the guy's tattoo. The teacher said out loud about Ermengarde and that they pretended to be students to get inside. The red-haired man only said that he could not leave the man alive, after which he quickly went on the attack, surrounding himself with orange-colored lightning. Under his feet and around Sun Huade, circles of emerald color began to appear. At the same time, he was standing in a fighting stance. Xinguang attacked first with his fist, then with his elbow, and then with his foot. But Sun Huade defended himself from the entire shield in the form of a blurry haze forming a circle. Having covered himself from the last attack of the guy, the teacher shielded himself with his hands, holding a shield with them. The guy raised his fist for a new furious attack, while saying that the teacher is a dead man, who after his attack will be like a turtle. But Sun Huade surprised the red-haired man by catching his fist in his left hand. In his right hand, the man formed energy, which then covered his arm, and attacked Xinguang in the stomach with this hand. The redhead flew into the wall, causing damage to it. Blood gushed out of his mouth. Xinguang sank to the floor, while holding on to the place of impact in the solar plexus with one hand, and tried to clear his throat, but at the same time he stared intently and angrily at the teacher. At this moment, the red-haired man was thinking that Sun Huade is very strong, so he has no other way out. After these thoughts, Xinguang took out some graphite-colored balls from his pants pocket and told the teacher that he would get even with him later. Then the guy threw the balls on the floor, which then caused a smoke screen to rise. Sun Huade was thinking that he needed to report the penetration of Ermengarde into the school campus. His gaze was full of seriousness. Meanwhile, the male dormitory of the Kaiyuan school, Liang Yonghui and Ma Jixing were in one of the rooms. The first one asked the black-haired man about the reason why Wang He has not returned yet. At the same time, he was holding and smoking a pipe. Liang Yonghui, with a smirk on his face, suggested that he might have been killed. Ma Jixing replied by saying that Wang He is a cultivator of the 9th rank, so he is not so easy to kill. After that, he decided to follow him, which he told his friend about. The black-haired man, being already outside that office, said out loud that Liang Yonghui had just got to the rank of the golden pill, and he was already so brave. But Ma Jixing was sure that he and Wang He would soon catch up with him. Coming out of the corner of the corridor, Ma Jixing saw someone. His eyes widened in surprise, and all because he saw Wang He, the defeated and dead Wang He, who was dragged by a young man with one hand, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. Ma Jixing hid behind a corner. He was shaking with fear, and he thought that maybe that guy wants to show off Van he defeated. For the man, the situation was turbulent. He did not understand what to do, because the young man is not a weakling, since he was able to deal with Wang He alone. He was afraid he might end up the same way. He decided to do something because of the lack of other options, while taking something covered in fire from his inner breast pocket. It was a gun. Ma Jixing recalled his conversation with Ao Ma, namely, as a blonde man, having given a gun to a black-haired man in his hands. He said that this gun was the latest weapon developed by Ermengarde. It absorbs spiritual power, and then abruptly throws it out. At the same time, it increases the power of the blow several times compared to the usual strength of cultivators. Ma Jixing was smiling broadly, gritting his teeth and thinking that the power of the shot would be more powerful than during the golden pill period. After that, he abruptly jumped out from around the corner, thinking that he would certainly defeat the young man, and began to form energy in the gun. After sufficient energy formation, the black-haired man fired. This energy was also felt by other people who were outside the hostel, and the bullet was flying at the young man's head with might and main. But she flew off his head into the wall next to Ma Jixing's head, which scared him, and then flew to the floor at the feet of the young man. This youth was Su Lai. He took off his hood, but the bullet did no harm. The young man did not understand what had happened, so he turned around to look. Su Lai saw a bullet in the floor, which caused cracks in the floor. The young man sat down and picked up the flattened bullet. He looked at her, while considering her a piece of iron, and also wondering where she even came from. Several people gathered near the hostel. Among them were Director Wu Defat and teacher Sun Huade. The director told the teacher that he also noticed fluctuations in strength, assuming that it was the work of Ermengarde. Sun Huade agreed with him, saying at the same time that he was attacked by one of them in the training building. He suggested that they could be everywhere, but their conversation was interrupted by some stirring from the forest. The director asked who was there while forming a golden sphere in his hands. It was Lu Xing, who, when she got out of the bushes, waved her hands to them and greeted the principal and the teacher. They were surprised at the appearance of the girl and asked how she ended up in this place. Lu Xing said she was looking for Su Lai because she was afraid he might be in danger. The teacher tensely asked her about the fact that Su Lai was still in the dorm. A woman with glasses was also in front of the hostel with them and was trying to figure out what to do, because the young man probably already encountered members of the Yermungand. Sun Huid turned around, but the director at that moment told him not to act recklessly, because the person who released such energy is at the rank of a golden pill, no less. But the teacher did not listen to him, resolutely going forward, and saying that one of their students was still inside, he needed help. At the same time, he thought that even if Su Lai uses the technique that he used during the fight with Jutao, his opponent is at the rank of the golden pill, so it won't help him. The director at Def cleared his throat, attracting the teacher's attention, but he did not pay attention to it. After that, the headmaster appeared in front of Sun Huade and said that, as the headmaster of the school, he could not leave it like this. Then he summoned the golden sword and said that he would go ahead. A man and a woman began to take out some black sticks that were located behind their backs and on their hips. While they were doing this, the director told them to walk behind and tread carefully. After that, they all went inside the dorm. Meanwhile, Su Lai noticed Ma Jixing in front of him and thought that the bullet had fallen from him. The young man noticed a revolver in the man's hand and thought that he had decided to kill him. Ma Jixing was shaking with fear and trying to force himself to move. He was thinking that he had failed, so he needed to leave as soon as possible. The man was afraid that Su Lai would attack him and start torturing him, so his death would not be painless. Su Lai stared intently at the man and did not understand what he was doing. At first, according to the young man, he threw pieces of iron, and then he beats himself at all. Does the man really want the young man to run away from him? Su Lai clutched the bullet in his hands and was grateful to Ma Jixiang. Aloud, the young man said that perhaps he would not be able to defeat him, but he could not leave everything like this. The man didn't understand what he was talking about. Meanwhile, Su Lai prepared to attack, making a swing with the hand that had the bullet in it. The young man thought that he would use this piece of iron to distract attention, and then he would strike and defeat him. Su Lai threw a bullet at the man, shouting that he was returning it. Ma Jixing stood and shook with fear while mentally asking for help. He was thinking about why he couldn't move. After that, the bullet flew through. Ma Jixing's body went limp and fell. The young man was surprised that he had succeeded and thought that he might have talents that he had not noticed before. He had a hard time with one intruder, and then another one appeared. Then, Su Lai noticed a revolver that was lying not far from the man's body. The young man ran up to the gun, which was still burning with energy. He took it in his hand, saying with a smile that the gun looked impressive, so he would take it away. Perhaps it might come in handy. Liang Yonghui was hiding behind one of the corners, watching the youth. He didn't understand what was wrong with him and how he could have killed Wang Qi and Ma Jixing. Liang Yonghui understood that fighting face to face was certain death for him, but if he left, he would also die, and attacking stealthily was also risky. The man was preparing for an attack, summoning energy to one of his hands. He was tense about the development of events, but then he was interrupted by someone calling from the stairs that led to the floor where he and the young man were. Liang Yonghui realized that one of the owners of the golden pill was on the way, so he had to leave. With his hand, he dispelled the energy. Liang Yonghui abruptly ran away from where he had been standing towards the corridor. The director and the others hid behind the wall on the stairwell. At that moment, Su Lai hid the gun in his belt at his stomach. He was wondering what to do, because, judging by the voice, it was the director. Su Lai thought that if those who came to his aid saw the bodies around him, they would think that he was one of the members of the Ermengand. The young man was thinking about what he should do. An idea came to his head, thanks to which he decided to improvise. The young man came up with the idea to make it look like they themselves fell on each other, and then dragged the bodies of the men who lost to him. After that, he put them right next to each other. He made Wang He's left hand, clenched into a fist, rested on Ma Jixing's forehead, and his right hand held his right hand, clenched into a fist at his chest. But then, from a flight of stairs into the corridor where Su Lai was, the director burst in. The director was surprised by the presence of the young man, so he asked him where he came from there at all, and also what he was doing there. Su Lai laughed awkwardly because of his questions. But then, an explosion rang out on the floor, which completely blew out one window, and then Liang Yonghui jumped out of it. When he landed, he looked back at the dorm building. After that, he went to his wall and activated purple energy on his hand, which began to flow around him. Liang Yonghui was smiling broadly, summoning more and more of his energy and directing it into the building. Thanks to this energy, he saw where the people who are inside the hostel are and what they are doing. Thanks to the energy, some kind of dragon was also shown, which was in an incomprehensible and unknown place. It was a battlefield. A man fought a dragon, but was easily defeated. The dragon looked out with his red eye from the portal that was in the dormitory. Su Lai greeted the principal, the teacher, and the headman who came to him. At that moment, the young man thought that they would understand everything. The director approached the bodies of the fallen and asked the young man what it was. Su Lai stiffened, and the director turned around and looked at him with a serious look. Here, Def was enveloped in his energy, glowing with a golden glow. After that, he directed it at the young man, who covered himself with his hands and began to talk about the mistake. But Su Lai felt that the energy was not dangerous for him. He was very scared, afraid that the director might do something to him. Wu Defa was thinking at that moment that Su Lai was still at the stage of Kai purification, thinking that someone else was responsible for the deaths of those people. After that, he cleared his throat, and after that he told the young man to leave there, otherwise he could be in danger at any moment. The director used his energy and found out that the victims were at the stage of laying the foundations. He didn't understand how someone could kill the two of them at once. He began to feel their bodies, first Wang He, and noted that his body did not transform and was often beaten. Wang He took nerve-stimulating drugs all year round, and the cause of his death was a soul rupture. After that, Wu Defa proceeded to examine Ma Jixang's wound. He realized that it was a fatal blow, and the person who inflicted it should be at the level of a golden pill, and no less. Su Lai definitely had nothing to do with it. The director pulled back the collar of Ma Jixang's clothes and looked at his tattoo. After that, he confirmed that they were members of Yermungand. The man's gaze was frowning. Def stuck his sword in the floor. The director thought about what he needed to look at, because, perhaps, to find some clues, because the members of the Yermungand would not have come to school just like that. The man adjusted his gloves and began to take pills out of the pockets of the dead. He listed that the Dabu pill, the Sisui pill, the Tianling pill all do not fit. After listing them, he put those pills in the breast pocket of his vest. Su Lai told the director that he was not quite convincing, and also that if he did not need it, then let him give the pills to the young man, because they might be useful to him. But then the director found something in the pocket of Wang He's pants. He took it in his hand, or rather an unusual cube of black color with red glowing inclusions. Def said it was a tetragonal seal. Apart from a specialist, no one else knows how to open it. The material of the seal is very hard, so it will not be possible to simply break it. After these words, the director handed the seal to teacher Sun Hueda, asking him to send the seal to the laboratory later, where it could be opened. The teacher accepted the seal. But then the cube fell, hit the floor, and then flew up to Su Lai and hit his sneakers. Because of this, the seal exploded. It amazed everyone. Sun Hueda suggested that perhaps it was Su Lai's energy raging again. Su Lai sat down on the floor, reaching for the cube with his hand, while saying that it was not his fault for what had happened. The young man at this moment was thinking about what he had been told about the difficulty of opening the seal, then why it opened. The young man picked up some kind of plate with a small red flashlight, which was inside the cube, and said that it was a communicator. The director immediately took him away. Udef said that the cipher is not particularly complicated, so he can easily figure it out. The director summoned his power and held the communicator with energy over his palm. The communicator's light bulb turned green, and it opened. A hologram of a man in a robe and with a tattoo of Ermengarde appeared to the eyes of those present. This person was saying that after Huang Heabo, the supervisor of the entrance exams, comes to Kaiyuan school, the order members should send 2 people to divert attention and kill the observer. The rest must destroy the energy collection tower according to the original plan. The man in the robe told the members of the Order of Ermengarde not to make a mistake. After these words of his, the recording ended, and the hologram disappeared. The director informed everyone that the purpose of the Ermengarde was not an observer. Their true mission was the destruction of the energy tower. Also, he added that the 2 defeated were just puppets. Wu Defa also said that as soon as the tower collapses, about 60% of the buildings will be unusable, so they will not receive energy. The energy stored in the tower will immediately spill out, with a force equivalent to an atomic bomb, which will spread to the entire city. The director was very tense and informed everyone that the real target was Wuji City. Su Lai raised his hand and said, turning to the director, that he had a question. The young man asked the director that if everything is so, then how could such important information be in the hands of the wrong people? Lu Xing agreed with the young man's words and said that the information might not be true, but it could still cause panic. The director replied that, regardless of the reliability, they must protect the tower, as it is a matter of security for the whole city. If they don't do anything, all cultivators will fail because of Ermengarde. That's what Director Wu Defa said. He was furious and involuntarily released his energy, the power of which amazed Su Lai and Lu Xing. The director took out his phone, on the screen of which it was written that he had failed to send a message. Everyone present started checking their phones for a signal. As a result, no one had a connection. They didn't understand what was going on. After that, it was decided to split up. A man and a woman ran into one corridor, and the principal, Teacher Xin, Su Lai and Lu Xing ran in the other direction. They had to hurry up and publish the news. The director, running out from around the corner, saw some kind of portal. He did not understand how it happened and where the stairs disappeared down. The others who came running after him also didn't understand anything. Su Lai started to walk towards the portal, but the director stopped him and said that it was probably the tricks of the Ermengarde, who wanted to lure them into a trap and cut off contacts between the outside world. Also, he said that first, they need to find out if they can get to other places. They turned around after the words from Def and went in the other direction from the portal. At that moment something began to appear from the portal. It was something inhuman, with scales and claws. His eyes were burning red. They all ran down the corridor together and saw that the bodies on the floor that had been lying there earlier were not in place. Lu Xing pointed her finger at that place and said about this fact. They ran up to that place. The director sat down on the floor and ran his gloves over the floor. Looking closely at his fingers, he said that the floor was covered with dust. Besides, there was no blood in that place. The bodies most likely just disappeared. But then, Def said they were on the wrong floor. Lu Xing and Su Lai looked back at the corridor they had come from. The girl said that how is this possible? Because they were definitely returning the same way. But then they noticed that the principal and the teacher were not with them. They began to look around. Su Lai suddenly took the girl's hand, thereby embarrassing her. And after that, he led Lu Xing down the corridor, continuing to hold his hand. At the same time, he himself was embarrassed and said that there was no director and teacher, so they should not be separated. Because of this they should stick together. Lu Xing was still confused, but they did not see that a dragon was crawling on the ceiling ahead of them. When he crawled up to them, he tried to attack the girl, opening his mouth wide and wanting to eat her. But Su Lai managed to sense the danger. Thanks to this, the young man managed to pull the girl almost out of the monster's mouth. Lu Xing and the monster's gazes crossed. After that, the young man pulled the girl after him, telling her that they were running away. The monster was rushing after them, almost catching up with them. Then Su Lai saw an open door to one of the rooms. He pulled Lu Xing into it and closed the door with lightning speed. They started moving things to the door. They were boxes, suitcases, and stuff. The monster was trying to get to them by knocking on the door. He knocked on the door with such force that cracks began to spread around it on the wall. And at some point he calmed down. Su Lai and Lu Xing leaned against the things that were propping up the door. The girl tried to pull her hand out of the young man's hand, but he did not let her do it, strengthening his grip, which surprised the girl. Su Lai, trying to catch his breath, asked the girl if she was okay. The girl, breathing heavily, turned away in embarrassment and agreed. Su Lai didn't understand what was wrong with her. But they didn't know yet that two blue eyes were watching them from the ventilation. They were the eyes of a monster. The monster broke through the ventilation grate with his paw, and then he broke through this grate to the end, sticking half of his body out of the ventilation, and growled loudly. At that moment, Lu Xing clung to Su Lai in fright and screamed. Su Lai took out a pistol from his belt, which was raised near Ma Jixang's body. At the same time, the young man thought about what he had almost forgotten, and also, Su Lai did not quite understand how to use this gun. Su Lai thought that he could only take full advantage of one thing. After that, the young man pointed the blazing gun at the monster, accumulating energy for the shot. The monster itself was advancing on him at that moment, its mouth wide open. There was a shot. Su Lai's hands twitched from the recoil, and the monster was hit by an attack, or rather, a shot from a pistol, like from a laser cannon. Lu Xing was clinging to the young man at the moment of the shot. Su Lai was glad that his idea was a success when the monster fell defeated. The girl, still holding on to Su Lai, asked him about where he got this gun. To this she received an answer that he found it from the defeated members of the Ermengarde, and he simply forgot to give it to the director. Su Lai and Lu Xing were sitting on the floor in front of the body of the defeated monster, under whose body a pool of blood was spreading. They both didn't understand what kind of monster it was. He seemed creepy to them. Lu Xing looked at the monster with a serious face and said about the sharp corners on it, similar to the blades of the handle. A portrait of this monster, or rather the ancient horned dragon Astrosratops, appeared in her head. There was also a description of him. The dragon had a mobile body, the head was covered with protruding horns. Besides, very sharp. Most often, the dragon lives in groups. Lu Xing told the young man that if she thinks correctly, this monster is a horned dragon. Su Lai was startled by this. The girl also said that this is a kind of social monster, and this means that there can be 5, 10 or even more. At this moment, several dragons like the one Su Lai defeated were passing through the corridor. One of the dragons passed by the door of the room where the guys were. Su Lai was looking through the peephole of the door at this moment, standing ready to attack. He was thinking that when there was only one dragon left in the corridor, they would have a chance to get out. The young man looked at the frightened Lu Xing, who was sitting on the floor next to him. Su Lai told her not to worry too much, because everything would be fine. Once they find the source of the dragons, Su Lai thinks that they will be able to return the dorm to its original state and get out of there. The young man asked that besides, hadn't he just dealt with the monster? Also, he told Lu Xing to calm down, because he wouldn't let Yermangan's plans come to fruition. At that moment, Xin Guang sneezed. He and Liang Yonghui were on the grounds of Kaiyuan school. They were sitting on one of the school buildings. The young man asked Liang Yonghui about how their plan was progressing. Liang Yonghui, smoking a pipe, said with a serious expression that Wang He and Ma Jixang were dead. Xin Guang was shocked and asked the senior comrade about how it happened. The answer to this question was given to him that Wang He and Ma Jixang were too careless and underestimated the enemy. In Liang Yonghui's eyes, Su Lai was a fierce and incredibly strong young man. He had never seen such strong people before, so the man hoped that he would never meet Su Lai again. Xin Guang took out a red stone, on which the sign of the Order of Ermengarde was located in the middle. He said they definitely needed to report everything. Liang Yonghui rushed to stop him. At the same time, he told the young man, in no case should they say anything, because if the commander finds out that they could not even deal with the student, then he will definitely get angry. They didn't know what to do. An image of an evil commander appeared in Xin Guang's head, tearing them apart. The young man began to shake with fear and said that the fact was that Liang Yonghui had not seen their commander in action, because if they did not complete the task, they would definitely come to an end. But Liang Yonghui only grinned at these words of his and said that it was not worth worrying, because he lured the headmaster of the Kaiyuan school and that student into a trap. Now they definitely won't be hindered by anything. At the same time, Liang Yonghui said all this, approaching right next to Xin Guang. He also said that if they completed the task, no one would even remember Wang He and Ma Jixang. Liang Yonghui held a canopy in one hand with the help of an energy communicator, and said that they were continuing. At that moment, a hologram of the school grounds appeared from the communicator. Meanwhile, one dragon was moving along the corridor. Su Lai listened to what was going on outside the door, and then said that he and Lu Xing were starting. The young man put his hand on the door handle, and then abruptly opened it. Su Lai, holding Lu Xing's hand, flew out of the room and concentrated the energy in the gun, preparing to fire it. The monster turned his head in their direction, but he did not have time to do anything, as he was hit by a pistol shot, which caused his head to separate from his body. The dormitory was surrounded by a dark-colored dome that sparkled with purple lightning. Director Wu Defa and teacher Sun Dehui were on the 8th floor of the dormitory, while Su Lai and Lu Xing were on the 2nd floor. The portal from which the monsters came out was on the stairway from the 1st to the 2nd floor. Teacher Sun said that everything was strange, because a lot of time has passed, but they still can't determine their location. The director also said, opening the doors to some room, that in any case, they needed to find Su Lai and Lu Xing as soon as possible, because they could be in danger. In his opinion, the students were not yet able to resist. But then, behind the slightly open doors, the teacher and the director saw some monsters, which were dragons. After a momentary surprise, both sides prepared to attack. The dragons went on the attack first, but came across a golden-colored shield, which surrounded himself and the teacher-director at def. After that, the director told teacher Sun to go ahead, because he would figure it out himself. After obtaining consent to this, Wu Defei enveloped his fist with a golden aura, and then attacked the dragon, hitting and driving it into the floor of the dormitory. Teacher Sun stood behind the headmaster on a dragon that was bound by chains created by him. Wu Defa drew attention to the teacher, and then approached him and the monster with a threatening look and said that he had not fought like this for a long time. Both were with a determined look. After that, the dragon was defeated. A young man was sitting on the floor against the wall in the corridor and was shaking with fear. A monster was coming at him menacingly. The young man waved him away with a bat and told him not to approach him. And so the dragon raised his clawed paw and cut the young man's bat into pieces. The young man, shrinking, shouted and asked for help. The monster's muzzle was already closed to him. But then something broke through the monster's head, and the young man continued to sit huddled. Then someone told him to get up, because he was safe now. When the young man opened his eyes and saw in front of him Su Lai, who was standing at the ready with a gun and a smiling Lu Xing. The young man called Su Lai by name and said that he was also in the dorm, then thanked him. Su Lai was surprised that the young man knew him. The young man replied to him that he had given a speech at last year's admission ceremony, and had always been a role model. The young man was very happy at the time of the speech. Su Lai agreed with him and asked why he was still in the dorm, because before that there was a warning about moving to a safer place. The young man replied that he overslept, and when he wanted to leave the room, he suddenly ran into a monster already at the door of the room. Su Lai smiled and told the young man to follow him and keep up. Lu Xing was also smiling. After a while, Su Lai, Lu Xing and the young man were sneaking down the stairs. Su Lai stopped his travelers, while carefully peeking around the corner. Then they were all amazed at the picture that appeared in front of them around the corner. It was a blue-colored portal. The portal led to a world where there were other dragons like the ones they had met earlier. Su Lai came out ahead of the guys and said that he would go first. If he didn't come back, then let them run away. They didn't need to wait for him. His gaze at that moment was serious and resolute. Before he left, Su Lai handed the gun to Lu Xing and told her to take it. If they were in a dangerous situation, then let her use it. The girl accepted the gun and told Su Lai to take care of herself. Entering the portal, Su Lai thought that he needed to be more careful. The dragon slept for a long time and then suddenly woke up. Su Lai, already standing at the portal, looked at the sleeping dragons and thought that the portal was most likely the main reason for the appearance of dragons in the dormitory. The young man suggested that if the portal was destroyed, everything would return to its former course. But then, a dragon's muzzle appeared from behind the portal, and then the monster attacked Su Lai with its paw. The young man jumped away from where he was and the dragon's paw landed there. This dragon was different from those that had previously appeared from the portal. He was several times bigger than those dragons. His body was covered with black scales with patches of yellow and orange. The dragon was surrounded by a black and red aura. Lu Xing and the young man shaking behind her looked at Su Lai and the dragon in a frightened way. Su Lai himself stopped at the portal at that moment. He looked at it and the dragon sleeping behind it and realized that the portal was not transmitting sounds. Therefore, he had to make decisions, otherwise the monsters might wake up. Su Lai clenched his hand into a fist and embraced him with energy. After that, he went on the attack and slammed his fist into the dragon's face. But this attack had no effect. Su Lai was surprised by this and thought about the reason why his power evaporated exactly the moment he touched it. The dragon threw Su Lai away with his paw. Lu Xing covered her mouth with one hand and thought about what the young man should do, because he is not a rival to the dragon. Meanwhile, Su Lai was recovering. The dragon threw him so hard into the wall that it cracked in the place where he landed. At this moment, Lu Xing was thinking that she needed to calm down, because Su Lai is in danger and she is the only one who can help him. Su Lai thought that the monster was different from the previous ones. The outer shell could not be penetrated by its own strength. His usual attack wouldn't change anything. He knew that himself. But then, Lu Xing fired several shots at the dragon, which covered itself from them with a paw. The bullets did not bring any harm to the dragon, but on the contrary only angered him. The monster looked at the girl with a ferocious look. She couldn't understand why her attacks didn't work. Su Lai shouted at the girl to run away. The dragon was already coming at her, and Lu Xing tried to shoot back at him and told him not to approach. Su Lai grabbed the dragon's hind leg with both hands. At that moment, the dragon was trying to eat the girl, and when his jaw did not close on her, he was surprised. The monster turned around and saw Su Lai, who was holding his paw, declaring himself energy. The young man reminded the dragon that he was his opponent, so let him not dare to be distracted from him. His gaze burned with determination and energy. After that, he said that he would take the dragon home. After that, he spun the monster around and threw it into the portal. This woke up the other dragons and did not understand what had happened. After this hitch, the dragons rushed into the portal. Su Lai embraced his right fist with energy and said that it was better for the monsters to be on the other side of the portal. After that, the young man flew into the portal. After this attack of his, the portal began to tighten. Already in the almost missing portal, Su Lai said goodbye to the monsters with a smile and said that he hoped about the absence of their meeting in the future. Here the portal finally closed, and the black dragon finally tried to attack the young man with his paw. The monster was not happy with this, so the sky of the place where they were burst out with his roar. The sports ground of the Kaiyuan school. Liang Yangwei was walking on the roof of the playground. He put some kind of small installation at one of the pillars. At the same time, he thought that soon everyone would know the true power. But then a voice came from behind him. This person asked Liang Yonghui about which course he was from. After that, he turned around and saw two similar young men in front of him. One of them had a monocle on his eye. His name is Cheng Feng. The other was standing with a tablet in his hands. His name is Cheng Lu. Both of them are teachers. Cheng Feng said that all the students had to evacuate and clarified that Liang Yonghui had not been notified about this and that he had forgotten in that place. Liang Yonghui looked angrily at the teachers and said that it was bothering him because he wasn't going to be particularly stressed. But apparently there was nothing left for him. At that moment, the teachers noticed the tattoo on Liang Yonghui's neck. Cheng Feng said that Liang Yonghui was from the Yermungand order, so they need to notify others. Cheng Lu put his hand in his pants pocket, but then Liang Yonghui's attack flew between them. His hands and himself were surrounded by black-red energy. He smiled angrily and said that they should not hope for help, because none of the teachers of the school are capable of anything. Liang Yonghui halted the dark flame. Using a high-speed punch, uses spiritual force to distort space and produce vibrations. Liang Yonghui said that, in his opinion, two insignificant people were very unlucky. At the same time, he went on the attack. The teacher's hands were embraced by blue-colored energy, and then they almost touched the palms, which were more and more surrounded by energy. Then they put their hands forward to attack, forming a sphere. Liang Yonghui was struck by the fact of joint cultivation. Joint cultivation is a type of cultivation in which the forces of two or more people are combined to produce a powerful attack. The energy of the teachers and Liang Yonghui collided, becoming a single ball, one half of which was red with black flecks, and the other half was blue. The wind rose around her. Liang Yonghui flew away due to this attack, sliding on the floor. He thought that the previous technique had consumed too much of his energy, and the dark flame was also expending a decent amount of energy. There was not much energy left. While the dust was settling, the teachers went on the attack, intending to attack Liang Yonghui from the air. Liang Yonghui managed to jump away from the attack, and one of the teachers landed on the place where he was standing, breaking the floor. At that moment, Cheng Lu jumped out from behind Cheng Feng. Cheng Lu attacked with a leg that was covered with energy with a Liang Yonghui turn. He managed to put out his hands in a defensive gesture. Meanwhile, Cheng Feng went on the attack again. He leaned his arm on Cheng Lu's shoulder and jumped, attacking with his foot. Liang Yonghui was surprised by this attack, but nevertheless managed to dodge. And again, Cheng Lu went on the attack, who raised his fist to strike and embraced him with energy. Liang Yonghui realized that he couldn't dodge when the fist had almost reached Liang Yonghui, but then a man appeared in a golden glow between him and the teachers, which surprised them. This man was Ao Ma. Cheng Feng said in surprise about the appearance of another enemy. To this, Cheng Lu said that what he was afraid of, you just need to kill the enemies. At the same time, he prepared his fist for a blow, in which he concentrated energy. Ao Ma snorted at this, and then raised his arm above his head to strike, covering it with energy. After that, he attacked Cheng Lu, cutting him in two. Cheng Feng called his name and reached out with his hand. After that, he jumped up, concentrated the energy in his fist to attack, and said that he was his opponent. Ao Ma said that he was looking for death, after which he kicked him in the stomach. Cheng Feng coughed up blood and then was thrown away. Liang Yonghui was surprised by the appearance of Commander Ao Ma. The dome around the Kaiyuan school dormitory began to disappear. Su Lai was lying on the floor and said that, finally, everything was back on track. Lu Xing and the young man he had saved were sitting on the floor next to him. The strange spiritual force disappeared. A message came to the director's phone, in which it was written about his payment arrears, so he was asked to pay it on time. He told Teacher Sun out loud that the signal had been restored. The director at Defa thought that they had been locked up in the dorm for too long, so he wouldn't even know how far Yermungand had progressed in their plans, so they needed to gather all the teachers as soon as possible. Director, leaving the scene of the battle, I told Teacher Sun Hueda to inform all the teachers so that they would immediately head to the tower. The teacher followed him. Behind them, in one of the ruined walls, there was a defeated dragon. Meanwhile, the Kaiyuan school's energy collection tower. Some teachers were in the air near this tower. They were floating on their swords. One of the teachers, a woman with short black hair and red eyes, special teacher Lu Cheng, made a suggestion. She said that everyone had already received a message from the director, which spoke about the importance of guarding the energy collection tower. The blonde man, teacher Yuan Zhen, said that he understood everything, so they can't let the members of the Ermengan get in. Lu Cheng turned to teacher Chen and asked if she had contacted other teachers. The woman who was Chen Yingyi's teacher, who had brown hair and blue eyes, replied that Teacher Sun and the director were patrolling together, and communication with the other two was lost. At that moment, Ao Ma grabbed Liang Yonghui by the neck and said that the two at the stage of laying the foundations almost overpowered him. It's a shame for a member of Ermengan. Liang Yonghui said he would explain everything. He began to explain breathlessly that a student at the Kai purification level had killed Wang He and Ma Jixing. If not for that, he would have been able to complete this mission long ago. Ao Ma told him that one person at the level of Kai purification killed Wang He and Ma Jixing, who were at the stage of laying the foundations, and clarified that he should believe it. Liang Yonghui was already gasping for breath, grabbing the commander's hand. He asked Ao Ma to give him another chance. Liang Yonghui said that everything is almost finished, because only the energy collection tower remains. At the same time, he raised his hand with the communicator in it. The commander said that he was still useful, grabbed the communicator and released Liang Yonghui. Ao Ma, opening the hologram from the communicator, saying that he was leaving the tower on Liang Yonghui so he could make amends. Liang Yonghui was trying to catch his breath. Ao Ma grinned and put his hand on Tom's shoulder, and then said that even if he died, he still had to plant the last bomb. Only in this case the task of Ermengarde would be completed. Commander Ao Ma's face at this moment was terrifying and full of rage. Liang Yonghui was terrified to the point of shaking and, in a stuttering voice, replied that he understood everything. Ao Ma wrapped his hand in energy and put it on his shoulder. The story begins with slowly opening eyes that dimly see what is happening. There's a guy in front of him saying something. The person on whose behalf the story is being narrated does not understand what this guy is talking about. His words close up again and he can't see anything anymore. Next we see a guy with red hair, who is sitting with his back to the wall. He scratches the back of his head and groans in pain, saying that his brain is bad. He removes his hand, sniffs and feels the stench. He assumes that something has gone stale. Next, he wonders what kind of place it is where he woke up, and why he is on the roof at all. He gets up and walks to the end of the building and looks down. He sees a lot of people from below and does not understand why they crowded together. He takes a closer look and realizes that something is wrong. He is startled abruptly, because he understands that these are no longer people, but zombies. He screams from ugly faces with red eyes and a lifeless expression. He abruptly steps back from fright. He tries to think about what is going on here at all, because he was in the normal world only a second ago. A lot of thoughts are spinning in his head. He can't think clearly. He searches his pockets in order to find his phone to go online and see what's going on. Of course, he doesn't find it, but he takes peanuts out of his pocket. He is surprised, because he remembers how he bought a bag of peanuts in the supermarket earlier. He sits down on the ground and realizes that it's over, because all he has is a bag of peanuts. He is sure that he will definitely die. Here he will gnaw nuts and immediately go to the next world. He begins to remember his life and says that he didn't even have a girlfriend, and he's already dying. Abruptly, the door behind him opens and a girl with blue hair gathered in a ponytail comes in. She herself is covered in wounds and abrasions. The hidden guy is watching her. He still thinks that he hasn't even had a girlfriend yet, and he's already dying. Well, that's it, he's finished. Suddenly, the girl pierces an unknown shell with a knife and removes the knife, after which liquid pours out of this shell. This is water. She washes herself with it, rubbing her neck, legs. The guy watches her, blushes and does not understand how a zombie can be so charming. He washes his face and removes his hands. She has long eyelashes and the same big blue eyes. The guy is still looking at her and thinking how beautiful and alive she is. Suddenly, he steps on a small stone, which makes a sound. The girl immediately reacts, turns around and walks towards him with such speed. He doesn't even have time to say hello to her, as she charges him in the face with her fist. He coughs from the blow. He is ordered not to move. She pulls out a gun and points it at his forehead. He immediately begs him to spare him and not to kill him. The girl is surprised and asks who he is. He blushes and stammers because he is intoxicated by her beauty. He still doesn't answer. Suddenly, some bird comes out of some backpack with a lock and asks if the enemy has invaded their territory. He turns his head and still asks if such a strong opponent is really. Do they think that this is enough to scare him? The bird? He will not retreat and goes into combat readiness. The girl grits her teeth from understanding his uncertainty and awkwardness. She slaps him in the face again, calling him bad. She puts a gun to his pelvis and says that she will make mincemeat out of him. He gets scared and shouts that it is not necessary and begs for mercy on his life. Suddenly, a huge zombie comes out behind them, looking like a titan with disproportionate body parts. He attacks the girl directly. She manages to get away from the blow, so that the monster's huge fist falls on the ground between the guy's legs. From such a blow, the floor cracks and breaks into small pieces. The guy from fright at first just sits, not moving. Then he realizes that a little more and he would have died. The monster's hand is still on the ground between the guy's legs. He gets mad and angry, says to the monster, "Is she really not normal at all? Well, if she was staring, then why beat him up?" The monster begins to growl, but one of his eyes is damaged after a blow from the girl. The monster begins to growl even more. He walks away from the guy and turns towards the girl, who continuously fires at him with 2 pistols. The zombie punches her again. She dodges and reflects that the skull of this mutant is too thick, and bullets cannot penetrate it. However, she shot him in the eye, and now he's just waving his claws. The monster continues to attack her in every possible way. The girl professionally dodges, while having time to think that the roof is limited in size, and there are not so many places to hide, and if he continues to smash like that, he will most likely attract other low-level zombies. The upper part of the body is huge, which leads to a lack of support for the lower part of the body, and the right leg, it seems, was broken before birth. She makes such conclusions because the mutant does not move very fast. The mutant continues to scream and growl. The girl pulls out a bandsaw with very sharp teeth, which was developed specifically for the battle against giant zombies. The mutant attacks her with a swing of his arm and with an oblique gait. A guy with red hair yells at her to be careful. Right at the last moment, he runs away from the blow, while managing to cut the monster's leg with this saw. In an instant, she does this to all his limbs with a bandsaw. The monster is defeated. The girl picks up a crystal and says that the nucleolus is of good quality this time. The guy, trembling with fear, just looks at her in silence. The girl looks at herself and the dirty spots on her leg and says that, after all, she just washed, and here is this dirt again. She approaches the guy, who is still trembling with fear, and asks what kind of a jerk he is, and what kind of camp he is from. He does not answer. After silence, the girl declares that she is actually talking to him. He, in turn, runs away from reality, saying what a realistic dream, that's why there were so many horrors to watch. So he'll sleep it off and everything will be like before again. He nibbles these peanuts in a panic. He has a hysterical laugh. He says that the taste of peanuts is just as persistent even in the world of dreams. The girl takes this pack of peanuts from him. She asks him with burning eyes and with great appetite who he is, and where he got valuable longevity nuts from. The guy is surprised and asks if she also likes peanuts. The girl removes her smile and reminds him with a bandsaw at his neck that she actually asked a question about which camp he was from and where he got such rare food. The cold touch of the knife and the burning pain he felt when he was cut made Qin Shuang finally realize that all this was real. He repeats the word no several times and asks the girl to remove the blade from his neck. He introduces himself, says that his name is Qin Shuang, and that he is just an ordinary handsome man, and peanuts are a snack that he carries with him for a snack. He bought it at the Vandame's supermarket. Suddenly some bullets flew in their direction, one of which wounded the girl in the leg. Qin Shuang is frightened by every movement. They run and hide behind the fence. Qin Shuang had already laid down on the ground, covering his head with his hands. He asks the girl how she is, because she has a bullet in her leg. The girl's leg turns blue, the wound increases and the veins on her leg begin to increase. She thinks why mutants got here. It turns out that that's it, hyenas ran in. Meanwhile, the people who let people in are standing in a bunch on the other side. One with a gun with a smile informs the others that after all, he said she was good, so he lured the zombies to her and let her take care of the zombies for them. Another person standing next to him calls him the boss and says that he is so smart, because he was able to get a zombie core without using a single soldier. The other is worried and asks the boss, and this girl after a bullet in her leg will not come after them to take revenge. The boss with the scar on his eye tells him not to worry, because there was corpse poison in the first bullet he fired. Now her death will not take long to wait. Meanwhile, Qin Shuang and the girl see how her leg just grows in size. The girl realizes that there was corpse poison in the bullet and says that despite the fact that she has evolved, the virus of an ordinary zombie does not spread to her. But this one is a new type of R virus that is more powerful than those weak infections. She turns to Qin Shuang and says that it looks like she won't survive this time. She informs that the people who shot them were from 17 Lager, and they need the fruit from the zombie she just laid, and they will kill them both if they catch them. Qin Shuang, in a stupor, asks what they should do then. The girl tells him that she can detain them so that he can escape. He immediately asks what about her then. She replies that there is a corpse poison in her, and only penicillin can neutralize it. She cannot leave because she quickly turns into a zombie, and then Qin Shuang will definitely not survive. She already feels even worse. She continues to persuade him that she can help him escape, but she also sets him a condition, asks him for a favor. She asks him to go and tell her sister to run. Without her protection, her sister will be caught by scumbags from Camp 17, and she will have something worse than death. But then she bows her head in doubt and hopes that maybe there is still a chance. He immediately asks if it really only needs penicillin to cure her. She gets angry and asks if he even knows what this only penicillin means. Does he imagine how difficult it is to get something like penicillin, because it is the rarest thing in the world? He asks again, is it really the rarest? The girl lets the smoke down and says she will shoot to distract them, and when the smoke gets thick, he will be able to escape through the door on the roof. She gives him a piece of paper and says that her sister is here. She asks him to remember so that he will definitely tell her what she asked him. She starts shooting through the smoke and shouts to Qin Shuang to run now. He tries to escape in a panic. In the process of escaping, Qin Shuang thinks that she just saved his life. How can he just leave her and run away? He thinks about penicillin. He just needs to go back to his world, because there he is in any pharmacy. He wants to go back. Suddenly, a system opens in front of him, a window with a screen that informs Qin Shuang that the system is turned on and asks if she should use the transfer. Qin Shuang does not understand what other transfer is in question. Is it really back to his world? The system responds to him that it is. The girl behind him screams, is he rooted there or something? Let him move more sharply. Qin Shuang asks if he can return from his world back here. The system responds that everything is correct. He says he wants to return to his world right now. The system announces the start of the move. A moment later he wakes up in the hospital. A pleasant breeze blows from the window. Someone is quarreling on the street. One asks the other, he bought a license. The other asks him to drive away. In the corridor, the doctor asks an elderly man how his legs are. He replies that they are much better. Meanwhile, Qin Shuang is running along this corridor with everyone, repeating aloud again and again about penicillin. Where is he? In another world, the girl was already tired. She stopped firing. He repeats his request without strength and emotion. Be sure to pass it to his sister. Those guys from 17 Lager are talking. The boss says that since the shots have stopped, the girl is already exhausted. He calls everyone else to follow him, saying that it's time to reap the fruits of the battle. In the real world, Qin Shuang is scolded by a nurse, telling him not to run through the corridors. This nurse was carrying some pills in cones. He sees it, puts everything under his t-shirt and runs away. The nurse does not understand anything and only looks back at his trail. Qin Shuang repeats again and again about carrying pills under his t-shirt. The girl is sitting in another world. Her whole body is covered with bright veins. She looks lifelessly at one point. Qin Shuang pokes her on the cheek, asking if she is still dead. She looks at him after the action. He exhales and speaks like a stone from his shoulders. She starts yelling at him, asking if he's okay with his brain, why he came back at all. Qin Huang takes out a pill bottle and shows it to the girl and informs her that he brought penicillin. She asks in a stupor where he got it from. He calmly and with a smile replies that he just went. Qin Huang asks her not to ask questions and claims that this is the real penicillin. He pours one pill into his palm, hands it to her and says that she will not die, and they will get out of here together and alive. He puts a pill in the girl's mouth with a request to take a sip. At first she just sits with her mouth closed, and then finally opens and swallows. Qin Shuang asks her, well, how does she feel, if she feels better? After a while, she exclaims that the tumor has disappeared and the poison has also disappeared. She examines her leg, which has almost completely recovered. She says she can't believe how she managed to suppress the poison in such a short time. She asks him, after bandaging her leg and putting on a shoe, what kind of penicillin it is. Suddenly the guys from Camp 17 come in. The boss orders others to find her for him. He still hopes that maybe he will be lucky to have fun if she is still alive. Suddenly, the girl raises her voice with a question. They are looking for her there. She stands proudly and confidently with a bandsaw in her hand. The guys are scared. She says that it's good, because she was just going to look for them, and they came by themselves. The boss of 17 Lager in complete shock asks how this is even possible, how she is still alive. The men chose that it was better for them to run. One begs for mercy, says that it is not necessary. The other asks for help. Meanwhile, Qin Shuang, who hears all this, is surprised by her and says that it looks like she obviously won't need help. He sees a notebook on the table, picks it up and assumes that it is a personal diary, and even if it is, he wonders what kind of normal person will keep it. He reads the first page and says that an adequate one will not write about it. It said that on July 21, 2080, it was a sunny day. A plump young woman from the house opposite went outside again to hang up her clothes to dry. From time to time she goes out to pick up dried clothes, a trifle, but it's nice. In the performance, a man admires what kind of figure she has. Then it was written that on July 22, 2080, on a day with variable clouds, a new manager was transferred to the company, who was accidentally put next to him. and she must be training a lot, because she's just space. Maybe he doesn't like the woman from the house opposite so much. Also in the diary there is information that there are rumors about an outbreak of the R virus in a neighboring province. He hopes that it will not spread to his area, but he also notices that the new girl just makes him stop being afraid. Then there is a picture of him hiding under the table and seeing his feet and heels. On the skin of the legs of this woman there are large and bright veins with spots on large areas. Then he sees her entire torso, and that it is also completely covered with these spots and veins. He is trembling with fear, but he does not take his eyes off her. Then he fully sees the face of his manager, which is again lifeless and directed to nowhere. The company was quarantined. He was even confined to 4 walls and was not allowed to leave. On July 24, 2080, the R virus infected most of the city. Residents were left with a minimum of provisions. Calls to responsible people remain unanswered. If this goes on, he may starve to death. On July 25, 2080, no matter what, he decided to crack the lock and go out. He needed to go outside and get some food himself. He opens the door and goes outside. Everything is empty, only garbage and fallen leaves from trees are lying on the roads. He went to the supermarket, where everyone is fighting for food, to the pharmacy, where chaos is happening. Everyone went crazy from vandalism and looting, grabbing everything they could. After he managed to heat up some food and medicine, on the way back he saw infected people biting people. Of course, from such a sight, he immediately takes off his feet. On August 3, 2080, on a rainy day, he writes that the TV signal suddenly disappeared 2 days ago, and the host on the last screen told them that help might not come and that they should try to help themselves, and said something about humanity not dying out and there is always hope. The author scoffs at such news. On August 17th, he ran out of all the food. But if he leaves this room, he will most likely be eaten alive by hordes of infected people outside. It must be painful. The last few days he has been filling his stomach with tap water. He does not know how long he will live. He misses so much by manager by. Suddenly he hears requests not to approach and questions what he wants from her. He looks up and realizes that this is the same woman from the opposite house, and if she makes noise, she will attract infected people here. He watches a fight where a man stabs her with a knife. He abruptly gets up from his seat and realizes that she was stabbed by her own husband. After he sees her husband bending over her and doing something near her, he doesn't understand what exactly. On August 19th, after 4 days without food, he was really dying. When he was completely desperate, someone knocked on his door. This someone asked if there was penicillin inside. He paid attention to it, barely raising his head. This man traded a huge pile of food for his penicillin. Penicillin really worked better than genetic antibiotics. It was hard to even believe that antibiotics didn't work. But some kind of penicillin is the strongest medicine. He eats bread, rolls, and chips with great appetite. The medicine he grabbed that day saved him, and he is still alive. When he was on the balcony on August 21st, he found a man downstairs who was eating something on the street, and he could not understand how horses can tolerate it at all. Is it really edible? This man ate the kernels after the zombies. On August 30th, all the penicillin hidden in his closet was stolen from him. He gets angry, calls them cursed animals, because it was his only hope to survive. On September 1st, he decided to leave this cage-like house. Even if the world outside is full of infected people, he no longer wants to starve to death in his room like a fool. He might be lucky to find food while he still has the strength, but if he doesn't, he'll just do what that guy did the other day. He meets a zombie with a hanging eyeball along the way. He is alert, trembling, but he is not going to run. He holds a knife in his hands and says that now either he will eat it or vice versa. This is the end of the diary entries. Qin Shuang flips through and does not understand. Is there really no more? He wonders if he has never come back, if he has died after all. He thinks that, not paying attention to it yet, the diary probably gave him an idea of what was happening in this world. People infected with the R virus turn into zombies that feed on people. Judging by the current situation with food shortages paralyzing cities, he believes that most people are already infected. And the most important thing in this dying world. He looks at his pockets, sees penicillin, and realizes that these drugs are the most important in this world. Penicillin is more expensive than a gem in this world, but it's what so many people are asking for, and what he can buy at the click of a finger in his world, which means, abruptly someone shouts to him that he is caught. The boss presses a gun to his temple and says that, so he had a can of penicillin, and he was thinking why this girl survived. The boss made Qin Shuang kneel down and give him all the medicines. He still holds the gun right in front of him. He takes the cone and is surprised and happy that it is also whole. If he gives the whole bottle to the organization, he will be promoted 3 steps up, and Qin Shuang will go 3 steps down to hell. The panicked man tells him to wait and informs him that he has more. A girl comes and asks not to shoot. The boss orders the girl to stand where she is or else he will kill Qin Shuang. The girl also pulls out a gun and says that if he shoots, she will smear his brain on the wall in the next second. She tells him to let Qin Shuang go, and then she will let him live. She also advises him to listen better to the sounds outside, because the loud noise and the smell of blood after the armed fight attracted a large group of zombies. If he let him go right now, he would have time to escape from here. If they delayed, then all 3 of them would die here. The boss clicks, sees dead people from Camp 17. The girl tells him that he has had enough for today and asks him to let him in. The boss addresses her as Xiao Yunlan, and says that she has killed so many of his brothers that she will not let her go just like that. The boss pushes Qin Shuang towards her, and he uses the rope and flies away. At the same time, he manages to tell her that the next time they meet, he will chop her into pieces and feed her to zombies to avenge his brothers. Gently falling on Xiao Yunlan, Qin Shuang is just enjoying what happened. The girl on nerves tells him whether she needs to detach him from himself or whether he will dump himself. A dark night is coming, clouds are in the sky, the stars are barely visible. Zombies are roaming the streets in a crowd. Xiao Yunlan and Qin Shuang look at the bottom through the window. The girl says that they seem to be far enough away from these walkers. She offers to rest before they hit the road. She turns to him and says that while they have time, she would like to clarify a couple of points, namely who he is, why he has things like peanuts and penicillin that ordinary people don't have. At first, he doubts and thinks what to say, even though this Xiao Yunlan looks, in his opinion, a very capable girl. But she will never reveal her cards. He thinks that if he reveals his secret, nothing good will happen, which means that he needs to somehow then dodge. He sits on the bed and after his thoughts just throws her a bottle of penicillin. She catches, examines and guesses that it is penicillin. Qin Shuang tells her to take the whole jar. She says she will accept it as a reward for saving her. Qin Shuang tells her that if she promises to follow him and protect him, then she can get more. He asks her how it is and offers to make a deal. She looks at the jar and asks if he's serious. He puts his hands to the side and tells her that it's not worth it. Let him just take it. He also mentions that he has not only penicillin, but also other things that she just craves. The girl asks if there is really something more important. He laughs at first and begins to list the food. Steamed lamb, bear's paw, which is also steamed, boiled seaweed, fried duck and chicken, fried goose, pickled salted duck, chicken and sauce, bacon, canned eggs, tripe, dried meat, sausage, smoked chicken with a white belly, steamed pork. Xiao Yunlan imagines it all. She's already drooling. After all the enumerations, she tells him to stop, and that she will not agree to defend him just because of such things, especially someone who may end up in the camp of her opponents. Qin Shuang says that there is no need to worry about it, because he does not belong to any camp. She can just consider him a spoiled handsome man who will end her life in paradise. But in general, in fact, he is just an unlucky hard worker of the 21st century. Xiao Yunlan thinks, well, yes, he looks exactly like a spoiled one. In her opinion, she reflects that she survived thanks to the penicillin he gave her. She doesn't like to realize it, but he is her savior. Finally, she says out loud that she's in. She asks him if it is true. His name is Qin Shuang. She says that from now on she will always follow him and protect him. But if she finds even a hint that his words were a lie, then she will let him into the cutlets. He smiles and says that she can call him just Shuang, pointing to her t-shirt, where his name is written. He also says, calling her baby Lanlin, that her happiness has come. He is still sitting on the bed. Xiao Yunlan is standing in front of him. He says that now that the contract is concluded, can he ask her something? She asks about what. Thus, a mini tour of the world is arranged, where the girl tells about what happened in this world after all. She is literally standing at the blackboard with a pointer stick, and he is sitting at his desk trying to write something down. The culprit of the end of the world is the R virus, which turned normal people into zombies, with an infection rate of 80%, reducing the world's population from 9 billion people to 1.5 billion and turned the remaining 7.5 billion into zombies. The core has both plant and mineral properties, and can be consumed directly by living beings, used to prepare evolutionary potions or as an energy reserve. When directly ingested, it provides a large amount of energy for a short period of time, replenishes the supply of nutrients, and has a small chance to promote emotion. Having prepared the evolution potion, there is a high probability that the organism will evolve, with different effects depending on its constitution. Evolution potions are divided into levels 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 has a 20% chance of evolution, Level 2 minus 30%. Level 3 has a 35% chance. They can be used individually or in arrays of 1, 3, 9 pieces to form energy arrays that can fully or even perfectly utilize the full power of the core. The core is also a common post-apocalyptic equivalent that can be exchanged for various materials. Due to the rapid adaptation of the R virus, which developed an amazing resistance to various antibiotics developed in the postmodern era, the effect of various high-tech genetic antibiotics was minimal. And it was penicillin antibiotics, which were the most common antibiotics many years ago, that proved to be exceptionally effective. But since the microorganisms synthesizing penicillin, such as syncillin, have also mutated and are difficult to produce under adverse conditions, penicillin has become a particularly valuable life-saving drug. In recent days, people have been loosely organized, like ancient tribal unions, with small organizations dependent on regional organizations, medium-sized organizations, and medium-sized organizations controlled by large organizations. Now they are in Chenju, there are 3 small organizations, Camp 17, Earth Construction and Ascending Together. She says the group they met earlier was from Camp 17. They are an organization of an undisguised mafia that burns, kills, and robs everything, has an almost perverted thirst for all kinds of materials, including women. They kill for pleasure and even eat terribly. The organization is large and located in Yuzhou. Qin Shuang thinks about the words and says that, in general, he understood everything. They stand at the window again and look into the distance. The girl says there are too many zombies in this area, and he's a real bag. She does not think that they will be able to return to the base today and then suggests finding a place to stay for the night. She tells him to go to bed and she will look after him. He only thinks. The girl closes her eyes in a sitting position. He says out loud that if you just look at her face, it's pretty hard to imagine that she's as combative as he knows her. After a while, Qin Shuang tells the system what he needs in the 21st century. She announces that the transfer is starting. He closes his eyes and then realizes that something is hard for him. He opens his eyes and sees a girl with long pink hair sitting on top of him and asking him if he's awake. Qin Shuang, of course, does not understand what is happening. He assumes a sitting position. From the sudden movement, the girl hit herself. Qin Shuang calls her mistress and asks why she is here. She replies that he was hit by some madman, but let him not be afraid, because the doctor said that everything is fine. She also says with a smile that it is good that she established his emergency contact. Otherwise the hospital would not be able to find anyone who would pay the hospital bill. Qin Shuang asks when he even had time. She does not answer and asks him if he is hungry. She can go down to buy him something to eat. He blushes and asks this hostess what she needs from him at all. She laughs at how embarrassed he was, that she was even embarrassed. Well, gee. She gets up, takes her purse and says that he doesn't even have any necessities here. She decides to go buy him anything. She asks if he needs something specific. He replies that, perhaps, there is. Then she asks him to just make a list. She's leaving. He is sitting alone on the bed and decides that while there is no one, he needs to deal with the system. He only realized that if you turn to the system, then a kind of menu appears on his hand. He looks at his forearm and calls it obvious that he has 3 buttons: memory, transfer, charge. He wonders how he should charge it and how much more is left. A girl with pink hair walks in, announcing out loud that she's back and out of breath with huge bags. He gets out of bed in order to help her. She replies that she will cope on her own, and let him not strain himself, because he is sick. He thinks that she is his mistress Zhang Luozu, a rich girl. Even if he was blind, he would understand that she likes him. But he will never have so much money to give her happiness. That's why he does not respond to her feelings. However, if he has a system now, there should be a huge profit from the sale of goods between 2 worlds. And with this money, maybe she and he. Suddenly the door opens. The girl turns around, calls the man who arrived Uncle Zhao and asks him what he is doing here, and how he found out where she is. She calls her Xiao Zhu and says that her father asked him to pick her up and take her to Yuhai Xuan's for dinner. She is angry and says that she said she wouldn't go because he has his own plans. He pushes her to the exit. She rebels that she won't go and let him not push her. He tells her that she must be there because it is her father's order. He pushes her out the door and asks her to wait down there. She asks through the crack of the door what he's up to. He dryly replies that it does not concern her and let her leave already. This uncle turns to Qin Shuang, who asks if there are any problems. Uncle says that he thought they had already cleared everything up, but he keeps dragging Xiao Zhu into his problems. Then he asks if he really wants to say that the money that was offered to him is not enough. He answers Uncle's question with a question about what will happen if he becomes rich. They are both silent at first, but then the uncle says whether he knows that there is one phrase that the little man has big ambitions, but he knows everything about Qin Shuang, and then complacently and rudely tells him that he will never reach the top in his life. Qin Shuang just looks at him viciously and silently. He is transported to another world. Yuan Lan tells him to wake up, because it's already dawn and it's time for them to go. From here the road to the base will take about an hour. Qin Shuang yawns sweetly and stretches. They are already walking on narrow roofs, and zombies are swarming from below and trying to reach them. The girl walks confidently, followed by Qin Shuang, trembling and asking to wait for her. At a certain moment, the girl informs that they are in place. They are standing at the edge of the roof. Xiao Yun Lan throws a stone at the wall. Some bridge descends from the wall, which helps them to move to another building. They enter the room. The girl tells him that this is their base. Qin Shuang says that it is so well hidden that you won't even realize from the outside that there is a room inside. She doesn't comment on it in any way and just goes ahead. They enter a room where there is a bed with a person. Xiao Yun Lan walks up to the bed, calls the person Yu Ruo and says she came back with penicillin. Qin Shuang is frightened by the sight. There lies a girl all bandaged up with the same large veins and spots. She calls Xiao Yun Lan's sister. Xiao Yun Lan gives Yu Ruo a pill and asks her to take the medicine. Then very soon she will feel much better. Qin Shuang asks her if this is her sister and what happened to her. She replies that her sister was wounded by a zombie, so she went on a sortie yesterday to get the core of a mutant zombie and exchange it for penicillin, but stumbled upon an ambush by those scumbags from Camp 17. Her little sister asks Xiao Yun Lan if she was ambushed, if she was injured. She replies that she is fine and asks her not to worry. She also mentions that she brought Qin Shuang, and that he got them penicillin, and if not for his help yesterday, she would not have returned. Her little sister tells him that she is very grateful and calls him their savior. He sadly replies that there's nothing. He thinks to himself that it's just a miracle that two girls managed to survive in such a world. He remembers those lifeless zombie faces. They sit down at the table. Xiao Yun Lan brings 2 cups of food and tells him to eat. He rejoices and says that they have been on their feet all day. He is simply starving. He eats with great appetite and thanks her for the food. But then he throws up in the trash all that he managed to eat. Xiao Yun Lan asks if it is not delicious at all. She is surprised because she is fine. After the nausea, he rubs his mouth and asks if they always eat this. He starts crying. She asks why he is crying. Is it really so disgusting? He says no, but he just feels sorry for the two of them. Then he confidently says that they will stop eating this garbage. He is looking for something in his pocket. She asks, in the sense of enough, what does it mean, because she barely fished it all out of the river. At this time, Qin Shuang finds it in his pocket, announces it, asks her to open her mouth and shoves something white at her. She starts chewing, tasting, her eyes start to shine, because it's yummy. She enjoys, speaks out loud about this rich milky taste, this divine sweetness. Qin Shuang asks her how she is, if she hears him at all, then says that it is a toffee white rabbit and asks if it tastes good to her. She confidently says that it is very tasty. He says that if you liked it, then he has more. He starts looking in his pockets again. He pulls the candy to her. She opens her mouth and starts aggressively eating the candy with his outstretched hand. He panics and tells her to wait and asks her not to bite off his hand. She blushes and says again that it's yummy and asks for more of these toffees. He rubs his hand and tells her he can. He gives her a few grand. Xiao Yun Lan gives toffee to her little sister and tells her to try it. She tries and says the same thing as Xiao Yun Lan. Then she asks what it is. The sister replies that it is milk toffee white rabbit. Their friend has just given her a taste of it. She says again that it's so delicious and how wonderful it is to live. Xiao Yun Lan tells her to chew slower because there are many more like that. In the background, Qin Shuang is crying because they are so sorry. He gives all the goodies to them. Xiao Yun Lan is surprised. She sees these snacks and says that these are the goodies she read about in books. Where did he get them from? She cautiously asks him if it's really all them. He says that, yes, and let them eat for their health and not worry, because he has a lot of them. She straightens up and gives him the bag. He asks what it is. She replies that these are all the cores that she managed to collect, and now they belong to him. Xiao Yun Lan hands him the bag of kernels that she managed to collect, and now they belong to Qin Shuang. He squeezes his hand, because as soon as she handed him the kernels, the seal on his left hand began to burn. He thinks, are they somehow connected to each other? Qin Shuang says it's fine, he'll take them, but then asks if she's sure she wants to give them all, because judging by her words, it's a very valuable thing. The girl says that the penicillin he gave her and her sister saved their lives. She also says that such food costs much more kernels. So far she has managed to collect only a small part, but then she promises that she will gradually repay him the entire debt. Suddenly, the topic of conversation changes by asking Qin Shuang if they have a toilet. He needs a big one. The girl points out the direction, then leaves with a bag, thanks her and says she will be back soon. He comes into the room and sees just a hole on the floor. He says it's a compost toilet. It's just lovely. He feels that the hole is deep here. And then he says it doesn't matter, he wants to get started. He opens the bag and says that while he is alone, it's time to study what kind of thing this zombie core is. He takes one out and applies it to his forearm. Its icon and the core itself are attracted to each other, forming a physical process similar to a current. As he thought, the core and the seal are somehow connected, because it burns again. After a while, the core disappears, as if it is sucked directly into his hand, which he is very surprised at. The system notifies that his charge has been replenished. He has been added the transfer possibilities for 2 pieces, and now he has a total of 3 transfer possibilities. He guesses that he needs the cores to recharge the system. He takes more cores in order to charge even more. While he was charging his system with great zeal, some cores just fell into the hole. The system notifies again and again that the charge is replenished. When the number of transfer possibilities has reached 9, he says that 9 is enough for him for now, and the remaining cores he doesn't finish because he sees that there are very few of them left in the bag. He wonders where his cores are, because there was a full bag right there, why there were only a couple of pieces left. He gets up, looks in the direction of the hole, from which a terrible stench emanates, and realizes that they fell exactly there. He comes out of the toilet depressed, guilty, and even with a smell. The girl sees his appearance and asks what happened and what happened to his face. He only replies that he was just constipated. There are still crowds of zombies on the street. Xiao Yunlan takes out his signature food again and gives it to Qin Shuang to eat. He doesn't understand why this particular food. Didn't he give her a bunch of delicious food? She asks how you can just eat such valuable food every day, especially since she worked hard to get it all from the river, not to waste the good. The girl starts to eat. He gets up from the table, removes the spoon from her hands and says that there is nothing to save, because he said that he has more if necessary. She asks if he didn't give her all the food he had. He thinks that she doesn't know that he has more supplies in the system storage. If he gets more food right now, it will be strange for her, but his supplies won't be enough for the 3 of them for a few days. He needs to go back and take more food with him. He clears his throat and finally says out loud that, to tell the truth, he is a merchant. Every few days they send him things to sell, so he asks her to believe that he has plenty of food. She asks again about the merchant and says why he didn't say it before. He replies that he didn't trust her at first, and in general, tomorrow he will go for the goods and bring even more food. The next day, he leaves, notifying others that he is going for goods. She asks him to wait and asks him to pick up something. She gives him a gun. He asks why this revolver is so small. She replies that it doesn't matter, the main thing is its effectiveness, because it is an excellent weapon for covert killings. She asks to take it with her just in case. She asks again if he will definitely go alone. Maybe she should still go with him. He replies that he doesn't need to, because he can handle it and will be back soon. He leaves, closing the door behind him. Her little sister gets out of bed, calls Xiao Yunlan. She wonders if Yu Ruo can already walk. She replies that yes, because the medicine that Qin Shuang brought works very well. Xiao Yunlan says it's great. Sis tells her to follow Qin Shuang to find out where he went. She asks why this is. The sister replies that his behavior and appearance are not at all like the locals, and he also knows very little about their world. She assumes that the words that he is a merchant are most likely lies to distract attention, and in general she suspects, even though he is extremely generous to them, it's too early for him trust. Qin Shuang leaves the girls. In a certain place he thinks that he seems to have gone far enough, and no one followed him. He looks around, sees that no one is there and orders the system to transfer to his real world. The system announces that the transfer is starting. He wakes up in the hospital again. He gets out of bed and says it's time to be discharged. Otherwise he has no money for such a long stay in the hospital. He's walking down the street, looking at some kind of note with a sad face. This month he has not been able to find a job, and all his savings are about to end. It used to seem to him that he would get rich someday, but in the end he is just a poor bastard. He thinks that the main thing now is to take valuable food for that world. Food and medicine, of course, are very much appreciated in that world, but it has no buyers at all. If he goes to that scumbag camp and tries to sell something, they'll just take everything away and then finish him off. He takes a lot of packs of food, goes to the cash register and asks to calculate. Behind him, another customer and the cashier are surprised by such a number. Qin Shuang thinks that although Xiao Yunlan is quite agile, she is weak, so she can help him not to become zombie food at most. While the cashier is punching through one product after another, Qin Shuang continues to think that, like she said, there are quite peaceful camps. He decides to try to get in touch with them. His thoughts are interrupted by the cashier, saying that in total he has 54,000 yuan, which is about 12,000. At first, he is afraid of the numbers, but then he just says, of course, and pays. He goes to some building with huge packages, enters a room and says that in his opinion there is still enough space in the system storage. Then he remembers that he still needs to grab a change of clothes. He needs half of the core for one transfer. He needs to try to spend less of these transfers. He remembers his failure in the toilet, grits his teeth and regrets, because he shouldn't have saved so much. Meanwhile, in a world full of zombies, Xiao Yunlan is looking hard for Qin Shuang. She says it's strange because this Qin Shuang just disappeared. And then she wonders if she's really that bad at surveillance. She decides to stand on the roof, because here is a great place to watch. Sometime he should reappear. Qin Shuang appears in the room with a huge backpack on his shoulders and a huge box in his hands. He decides to put some of the things in a backpack so that they don't suspect anything. He walks across the bridge. He looks down in the crowds of zombies and says that when he left, there were no zombies there. There is such a crowd that he decides it's better to get around them somehow. He keeps walking, but suddenly doesn't realize what's going on. Because the further he goes, the more zombies. He screams, calling Xiao Yunlan for help. He looks at the sky, zombies are reaching out to him. He realizes that there is already an abyss, and there is no way to get through and decides it's better to return. But suddenly he sees that the zombies are already on the same surface with him. They are walking slowly, and with an oblique gait straight towards him. He gets so scared that he screams and sticks out his eyes. One zombie with a crazy but lifeless face is walking towards him. The zombie pushes him down. All his snacks and food spill out. He falls, but manages to hold onto some rope. The rest of the zombies just fell to the ground. He panics and tells the system to move it. The system, at the wrong time, says that the passive ability, the skill of rapid climbing, is already being used, and asks whether to improve it. He shouts that he can't stand it and asks for a transfer soon. The system tells him that he has 7 skill points. The cost of improving a passive ability is equal to 1 skill point. Each subsequent improvement of the ability is equal to twice the number of points for the previous improvement. He shouts why she is talking, and sharply twice tells the system to improve. She announces that the passive climbing ability has been improved by 2 levels, and 1 + 2 experience points have been spent. A sound is made, some kind of aura appears around it, similar to lightning. Now he only holds on with one hand. He says it's cool because he can now easily hold on to the wire with one hand. He pulls his legs up to him and says that it's just miracles. He stands on the wire and says that he can still walk on the wire just like on the ground. He's thrilled because he's like Spider-Man. He bends over and parodies Spider-Man. Xiao Yunlan is looking at him. She thought that this Qin Shuang was an ordinary sissy, but it turns out that he is so clever. She thinks Ruo was right, that this guy is far from simple. Qin Shuang descends from the wire and lands on the ground. He decides to climb somewhere higher to find another way to the base, because that road is full of zombies. He thinks that there will be a good view from that building. He quickly climbs up the wall. Now it's easier for him to climb the wall. He wonders if there are any other abilities in this system. He wants to try them out as soon as possible. He stops at some window, looks inside the building and again sees a crowd of zombies that growl and want to pounce on him. He farts and says that these zombies are even more disgusting up close. He asks if they want to taste fresh meat, and then tells them to try to catch it, calling them smelly zombies. Suddenly, the window glass begins to crack and finally breaks to pieces. He falls right on the zombies, who reach out to him with their hands and growling. He swears and gets so scared that both snot and tears flow. He jerks his hand sharply towards the zombie in order to defend himself. As a result, this hand just hits the zombie that his head flies off. Qin Shuang himself did not understand at first. Did his hands become so strong that he could easily take off the head of a zombie? His hand is covered in blood. Unexpectedly, another zombie will attack him from behind. Qin Shuang also easily kills him. But he understands that even if he were Edward Scissorhands, he would not be able to cope with such a crowd of zombies. He needs to get out of there urgently. He jumps out of the window, holding onto another window. The zombies that followed him just fell out of the window down. He holds onto the wall, sees the attacking zombies and says it was dangerous. If even a piece of skin is pierced through him, you can already say goodbye to life. In such a dangerous world, it's better not to show off once again. He notices that it has suddenly become easier for him to move around. He wonders why this is. But then he realizes that it's easy for him because a huge backpack has disappeared. He looks down, eyes searching for his backpack, and finally finds it on the ground among a crowd of zombies. He is already crying and wondering why it turns out that during this trip he did not get anything and all the precious things were lost. He spent all his hard-earned fortune on them. Then he gets ready and firmly says that no, he was going to save this money for his funeral, so he must return the backpack at any cost. After a while, he descends closer to the zombie, stretches out his head and arm. He tells them that he has returned and asks, waving this hand, if they would like to eat his white pen. Zombies reflexively attack him, but he moves away, after which the zombie falls through the window again. He also mocks, saying that everything is right, let them take their time and everyone falls in turn. After everyone has fallen, he looks into the room and concludes that everyone is downstairs. Well, the crowd, his arm is already numb to spank them. He sees his backpack on the floor, comes in, takes the backpack and dusts it off. He also says what to be afraid of, you just need to be able to cheat. Suddenly something has happened. He feels someone's presence. He wonders if it was really his imagination, or if he really just saw a red shadow or what it was at all. He looks around, checking the room, and assumes that his eyes are rippling. But in the end, he sees a peculiar creature of red color. It revolves around him. All this time Qin Shuang does not move. He is frozen in fear. As soon as the blood dripped on him from this zombie, he begins to panic and scream. This zombie with bright and red eyes is attacking him. After being hit, Qin Shuang flew towards the door, which opened. Accordingly, he hits the wall of the corridor. Blood flows from his mouth. He groans in pain. He gets up quickly and decides to just run away. He is followed by this red zombie with a sly laugh. In the process of running, he thinks that this is a strange zombie. His speed is so great that he does not even see how he is approaching him. If he is now transported to his world to hide, then the next time he is transferred, he will still be here. And then it turns out that he will waste the cores. While he is running, the zombie moves from wall to wall at such a speed that it is not even visible. He realizes that he is almost catching up with him. He decides to go to the bank. The zombie jumps at him, opening its mouth. Qin Shuang tells the system that he wants to spend all the remaining cores and skill points to improve. A sound is made from the system, and it announces that all skill points have been spent. The climbing speed has been improved to level 6. Special skills of courage and prudence have been obtained, as well as a firm step. All the forces are activated and Qin Shuang manages to escape from the zombie attack to the side. He realizes that now he sees all his movements, and even manages to dodge his attacks. He continues to run away from him, realizing that he still continues to pursue him. It is not so easy for him to get away from him. He used all the skill points, and in the end just matched him in speed. He says out loud that he thought that he would be able to pin him after leveling up the ability. At this rate, his strength is quickly running out. He won't last long. If he slows down even for a second, the zombie will catch up with him and grab his neck to bite. He stops and sees a zombie rapidly approaching him. Qin Shuang looks at him carefully, waiting for the zombie's actions. As soon as he attacks from a decent distance, Qin Shuang takes a stick and stabs the zombie in the shoulder with it. The zombie hangs on a stick, bleeding, his limbs dangle, and he giggles endlessly, which makes Qin Shuang uneasy. He does not understand, therefore he is still alive. This is terrible for him. While the crowd of zombies is on the street, Qin Shuang takes out the zombie core with his hand. The dead zombie is lying on the floor. He bends down wearily and says that it seems he was able to cover something after all. He leaves the building, followed by Xiao Yunlan. She is surprised that he was able to get out. She thinks that he is about on the same level with her in strength. He walks across the bridge, comes in and announces to the girls that he is back. He shouts at them to go see what good things he brought them. He is sure that they will be just shocked. Yu Ruo turns to him and asks if he has really returned. She is already standing all healthy in normal clothes without bandages. He does not recognize her and asks who she is. She introduces Yu Ruo, winking at him, and asks if he didn't recognize her without the bandages. She also asks him why he has blood on his clothes, if he is injured. He replies that he's fine, and that it's just zombie blood. She flirts with him and asks if he says it honestly, because he can't deceive her and she'd rather examine him. Qin Shuang blushes and hugs her to him. He says that it's fine, let her examine him properly, because such a sweet loli wants to examine him. He could not even dream of such a thing. He just enjoys the fact that they are standing close together, saying how wonderful life is. Yu Ruo walks away and says that he is really fine, and now she is calm. She takes his hand and tells him that he is so dirty and that he needs to wash as soon as possible. She invites him to wash together. He blushes even more and asks if she really suggests that he go to bathe together. She winks and says that this is exactly what she is offering, because there are very few water sources now, so they need to save. In the shower, Ruo washes himself, applying foam to his hair. Qin Shuang looks at her in awkwardness and uncertainty. The sister calls him, asking what he is digging there. She tells him to undress and come in soon. He asks if she thinks her sister will kill him if she finds out. She turns to him and asks why she should be angry, because they also wash together with her, and then says, okay, he's all ready. She calls him to come in soon. He says, undressing? Well, if so, it would be rude to refuse. Then he comes to her with a great desire, admiring her. But abruptly, Xiao Yunlan grabs his hair and says that he should stand. Then she asks in anger if he really saw her sister not dressed. He laughs nervously and says that he did not see anything, and begins to tell that, to be honest, he has had a vision of -8,000 since childhood. He is so short-sighted that one day he did not recognize his own uncle when he stood 3 centimeters in front of him. After a while, the already dressed Qin Shuang, under the fierce and evil gaze of Xiao Yunlan, first laughs, and then tells them to see what good things he brought them. He takes food out of his backpack and says that there is so much food here that they will have enough for several days. He takes bananas out of his backpack and says that he brought fruit for a balanced diet. Xiao Yunlan's eyes already glistened at the sight of bananas. He hands it to her and asks if she really likes bananas so much. He cleans one for her, peeling off the peel and giving her a taste. She opens her mouth, wraps her lips around the banana and bites off. Qin Shuang looks at her very strangely with red cheeks. Xiao Yunlan is delighted with the sweetness and taste of the banana. She looks at Qin Shuang, who is standing looking at the top and trembling all over. She asks what's wrong with him. He says to be quiet. She wants to replay this moment a little more. The sisters sit and eat. Ruo says how much delicious. It's like she's in a dream. Xiao Yunlan asks Qin Shuang if he really gives them all the pile of food. Does he know that these are all very, very precious things? Qin Shuang replies that yes, he knows, but he promised them that he would be generous and kind to them if they promised to protect him. Xiao Yunlan thinks that's right. Whatever it is, she should keep her promise. But when he got into trouble, she watched him from hiding and did not come to help. Then he tells them out loud that, unfortunately, his savings will only be saved one more time and you need to figure out a way to make money. And he thinks to himself that he needs to figure out a way to get the cores to use the transfer, because all the cores have gone to pumping abilities. Xiao Yunlan asks why he needs money. They are just unnecessary paper now. It's even inconvenient to wipe with them. He immediately gathers his thoughts and says that he meant gold, silver, well, or something like that. His trade is based on the exchange of these values for things. Xiao Yunlan abruptly gets up from the table, while her sister Ruo appetizingly eats food, soiling the area around her mouth. Xiao Yunlan starts looking for something under the table, pushing it away while the two watch her movements. She takes out a gold bar, puts it on the table and asks him if it will go. He no longer sees one ingot, but several shiny ingots. He takes the ingot in his hands and says that it feels like gold. Xiao Yunlan says that's right, she remembers, that's what it was called. Now it's also a useless thing. It's square, so she decided to put it under the table leg. She asks again if it will pass for suitable values. She turns around and points to the gold bars that stand under the legs of the tables and says that if she fits, then she has 5 or 6 more of these under the table. Xiao Yunlan eats his food and tells him to take it for himself, because they don't use it anyway. Qin Shuang looks at the shiny square bars of gold and can't believe his eyes. A bright moonlit night. Qin Huang is lying on the bed, laughing softly. He says that he is rich. Someone in boots approaches him. He still mumbles words in the process of sleeping that he is now rich and finally he can. Ruo approaches him with a knife. He swings it at Qin Shuang and attacks him, when suddenly Xiao Yunlan grabs her hand. She whispers to her little sister, what is she doing? She looks at him angrily and says that if they kill him right now, then all his precious things will belong to them. Xiao Yunlan says that this is impossible, because he saved them, and if it wasn't for penicillin, the sisters would already be in the next world, so that's what she wants to repay for her help. Ruo gets angry and whispers to her, has she really forgotten why they were on such a day? A certain Hu Xiao Rong is the one who was able to ingratiate himself into Xiao Yunlan's confidence with the same behavior. Ruo asks what happened in the end. They betrayed them and leaked information to Camp 17. A few dozen people from their base all died, and only they survived, Xiao Yunlan and Yu Ruo. My sister says that if she hadn't gone into the shower, she would have put out his eye long ago. Xiao Yunlan tells her that Qin Shuang is not like that, because he didn't need to waste penicillin on the two of them, who are on the verge of death. Yes, if they sell everything they have, they will not be given a bottle of penicillin for it. And Qin Shuang just gave them such a value, so he is definitely not a bad person. Suddenly Qin Shuang wakes up and asks the sisters what happened to them, what they are whispering about. Yu Ruo jumps on his bed, calls him Brother Shuang and says she wants to sleep with him. Qin Shuang tells her, so she would have said so right away, why waste her precious time? Xiao Yunlan suddenly intervenes and tells Qin Shuang that she also wants to sleep with him. Yu Ruo immediately frowns, and the surprised Qin Shuang asks if she also wants, then he will sleep in the middle. Qin Shuang is happy and relaxed lying between two girls. Yu Ruo is pressed close to him. Xiao Yunlan is lying quietly on the other side. When Qin Shuang falls asleep, Yu Ruo takes out a weapon from under the pillow again and aims at Qin Shuang's pelvis. She swings, but then Xiao Yunlan interferes with her again. She kicks the weapon with her foot so that it flies away with a squeal. Qin Shuang wakes up abruptly from the fact that he feels someone's body on him. It was Xiao Yunlan's attempt to save him who had to sit on him. He asks her with a sly and suspicious look what she is doing. She doesn't answer and looks at him in silence. In the background, an angry and offended Yu Ruo looks at the two. Qin Shuang says that if she wants to talk, then let them do it alone, because her sister is here, if anything. Xiao Yunlan leans over to him and says that he wants them to sleep, just the two of them. He's panicking. Xiao Yunlan turns to Yu Ruo and says confidently, while she looks at her angrily, that from today Xiao Yunlan and Qin Shuang are sleeping together, and if someone suddenly wants to attack at night, then she will be able to fight back. Qin Shuang says that this is true, because safety is important, so he can go for it. The next day, Yu Ruo sits next to Qin and asks him a question. She assumes that he is one of the evolved ones. He turns to him and asks why. He's just the most ordinary handsome. She asks, looking straight at him, then how did he climb the skyscraper? He asks her how she knows this. She points to her nose and says that she has a keen sense of smell, and that when he returned home, she smelled everything. She pretends to be delighted and scared and says that the building is very scary, and only the coolest evolved ones are able to get out of there alive. And for sure, he is so cool too. Qin Shuang smiles and says that he just got lost yesterday, and then came across a couple of zombies, and also thanks to Xiao Yunlan's revolver, he managed to survive. In general, he did not take a revolver with him at all. He thinks to himself that he can't just say that the system helped him, so far he can only deceive them. Then Xiao Yunlan says that this means that he is a good shot. Then she invites him to go shoot at the range. As a result, he never got to the training ground. Xiao Yunlan asks him if he was aiming accurately at the target or if he has vision problems. Tired and drooping, he just stands next to her with a gun. Then Xiao Yunlan approaches him and says that well, here he gives. The weapon is not held like that, and she offers him to teach him how to hold a weapon. She puts her hand under Qin Shuang's arm. He only blushes. Xiao Yunlan tells Qin Shuang to relax his shoulder and not keep his body in such tension. Stand still and aim. She shouts at him to start the fire. He pulls the trigger, but still the bullet flew past the target, but into the board itself. He is happy that he got there. The system tells him that the ability to wield ranged weapons is available, and the system also asks him if it is worth improving this skill. Qin Shuang pays attention to this. He thinks that there are still other abilities in the system, but he has no cores left at all. Only one of the red zombies that he managed to kill. There are 2 skill points in the core. One such point is spent on transferring. He decides it's better to leave the points for transferring to his world. He doesn't have so many of them to spend on improving a new ability. He asks Xiao Yunlan if she knows by any chance where you can buy kernels here. She answers with a question. Does he mean to exchange valuables for cores? If so, then there is such a place. 2 kilometers from here there is a small exchange point. She thinks it's possible to get cores there. He tells her that it's great and asks her to take him there. They enter some kind of gate. A man is sitting there with one eye closed and reading a newspaper. There's a knock on his door. He turns around and tells them to come in. Both come in and see this guy with a gun in his hands, aiming right at them. Xiao Yunlan calls him Old Pepper and asks why he was so scared. Does he think there are still zombies in such a place? He lowers his weapon and asks them for forgiveness. The man says that he is not afraid of zombies, but of people. Finally, he asks what they want to exchange. Qin Shuang says that he needs the cores, whether this man will find them. He asks what he can give in return. Qin Shuang puts 3 tin cans on the table. The man is surprised, picks up this jar, looks at it and says that this thing is canned food from the distant beginning of the 21st century. In their time there are very few of them left. Qin Shuang takes the jar from his hands, tells him to wait and asks for the kernels first. He laughs, saying that you can't fool him, because at first glance he is a fool, but in fact he is quite smart. He smiles and says that he himself has just said that he is afraid of people, not zombies, so you need to be always on your guard. The man asks them to wait here, and he will go and bring everything. He comes back, puts a white bag on the table and says that these are all the cores he has, and there are 11 of them in total. He also says that he usually gives only 2 cores for a jar of expired meat. But Qin Shuang has canned food of the highest quality, so he will give him 4 cores for a jar of fresh meat. He says he can exchange 3 of his cans for 12 cores, but he only has 11 of them, so he owes him 1 core. He keeps talking and offers him to make a deal, and he will return the remaining core later. Qin Shuang takes out another jar and says that there is no need to return it, and in addition he will give him 4 more cans. The man does not understand and asks him again. Qin Shuang leans over to him and says that he has a request for him. He asks suspiciously what kind of request is this. Qin Shuang takes out a square gold ingot and asks to look carefully and say what it is. He thinks about it, scratches his chin and says that his eyesight is not very good, but it must be gold. He rejoices and says that everything is right, everything is fine with his eyesight. After all, it's not for nothing that they came to him. He puts the jar on the table and says that an additional jar of stew is his commission. He addresses him as an uncle, calling him that, and says that he probably knows a lot of people. He asks this uncle to ask people to collect this gold for him, and in return he will give him canned food. He asks how he likes such a deal. He asks him with disbelief to listen that his trading plan sounds quite profitable. But why does he need gold? Because it has long been a useless thing. The one with a sly smile and a satisfied face asks him not to even worry about it and just try to find him for Qin Shuang. And of course, the more the better, and the better as much as possible. He shows a sign with his hands, forming a circle with 3 fingers up, indicating that everything will be fine. Everything will be okay. They're coming out. After a while, the system notifies him that the charge is replenished. He applies the core to his arm again, and it is absorbed into his skin. The system reports the number of skill points, which is 24. Qin Shuang says out loud that he wants to improve the ability to use ranged weapons by 4 levels. A purple aura appears around him. The system makes a bell sound and says that the ability to wield ranged weapons has been improved by 4 levels, and a special active skill has been obtained, which is called a fatal bullet. His number of skill points is 9 units, and the system also notifies that the next improvement requires 16 skill points. He loads the pistol and fires the bullets several times, which are launched forward with a bright light, in a confident sideways stance and straight outstretched right arm, and they all hit the target directly. He exclaims that he hit the bullseye, rejoicing at this. He confidently looks at the target with a satisfied smile, and says that now he has reached the level of a skilled shooter. He is still at the training ground practicing his new skills acquired by the system, thanks to the exchange of 4 cans of stew with a man who exchanged them for 11 cores. He says to himself that he has received a new special skill, which is called a fatal bullet. He thinks it sounds like something really unrealistically cool. He decides to try it out. He holds the gun in front of him with both hands. The system gives him a hint that the fatal bullet can be used for free only 1 time a day. Of course, Qin Shuang doesn't like it and asks what this system is doing, why it is so greedy. He puts up with it and finally asks the system, so how can he apply this skill? The system tells him that he needs to say words like fatal bullet and give the order to shoot, and then the fatal bullet will shoot in this way. Qin Shuang doesn't like it. He asks if this is a joke. Does he really look like some kind of superhero? Why does he need to shout something to use the skill? It's such a shame. The system starts to argue with him already, asking the answer question. Don't people like to shout out the name of the technique before using it? And it also reports that this method of activating the skill was developed in accordance with his habits. He gets nervous and annoyed. Is it really now that artificial intelligence has decided to get into people? Something he does not remember being so worried about when he was on the verge of death. He looks around, sees that no one is there. He clenches his fist in his left hand, holding the gun tightly with his right hand. Then he lowers his left hand and puts it on his stomach, and raises his right hand high above his head with the gun up. He gives the command to the fatal bullet to shoot, lowering his hand and pointing the gun directly into the building. The bullet flies off with a purple aura. Both girls are watching him from the door. One asks a friend what he is doing. The other replies that she also has no idea at all. The bullet flew off into the unknown. He looks into the distance and does not understand, because the bullet hit that building. However, as he sees, nothing happened. He is disappointed and wonders what was the difference between the usual bullet and the fatal bullet. After a while, all three of them are already doing business. Qin Shuang thinks he needs to study this ability better. Two girls are lifting huge bags, crates and barrels, going to remove all this junk from here, because they need to free up a room for Qin Shuang. He finally pays attention to them, is surprised and asks if it is normal for them to carry so many things at all. He offers his help. Xiao Yunlan does not understand what he is talking about, because they are light, because for evolved people such weight should not be a problem at all. She puts these bags of boxes in a corner. Qin Shuang asks if all the evolved ones are so incredible. She turns to him and says that almost everyone. In any case, ordinary survivors cannot compare with them. However, she also notices that those who were able to evolve are extremely few. He is interested in this and asks Xiao Yunlan what is needed for this, and is it possible to somehow become the same as them, evolved. The girl dusts off her hands, patting them against each other, and asks if he really wants to become one. She thinks about it and tells him that there are 3 ways to do this. The first is that when infected with the P virus, you need to overcome it and develop immunity, in which case there is a chance to become evolved. But there were many such cases during the outbreak of the virus. Now you will hardly find such a thing. The second way is to swallow the kernel. If it doesn't burst from the inside, then with a 10% chance it will become evolved. For the third method, you will need an evolution potion. A potion of the first level has a 10% chance of evolution. The second, 20%, and the third, 30%. She says she has heard that there are better potions in large organizations. After listening to all this, he already cheered up, despite all the warnings that Xiao Yunlan had told him about. He asks her the question of where to get these potions. He says he can exchange at least a whole bunch of valuable things for them. Xiao Yunlan replies to him that she can take him to try his luck to unite the buildings of the mainland. She also notices that they are not like Camp 17. The benefits are important to them, so they may be able to exchange the potion of evolution. He says that it's great and that they will move out tomorrow. The next day, as the sun rose, they are preparing for a hike. Against the background, Yu Ruo makes an offended face. Qin Shuang notices this and turns to Xiao Yunlan with a question. Won't Yu Ruo go with them? He says whether it seems to him or not, but lately she has been staring at him strangely all the time. Xiao Yunlan confidently and indifferently tells him not to pay attention, and also that she is staring because she has vision problems. There is still the same crowd of zombies on the street. They are all trying to climb the wall, stepping on each other. They are of different physiques. There are huge mutants, and there are frail and small ones. Xiao Yunlan wonders why it seems to her that there are more and more zombies at the base. She says she will need to find time and clear everything here. Behind him, Qin Shuang walks unsteadily, looking down at the zombies. Meanwhile, Yu Ruo is also training to shoot a pistol at the training ground. She does it aggressively and impulsively, angry at Qin Shuang and Xiao Yunlan, because she did not let her kill him in the shower or on the bed. Suddenly, the building opposite her abruptly begins to collapse, breaking into pieces. The walls broken with a crash fall apart. Buildings just fall down. Yu Ruo does not understand why so abruptly and unexpectedly, and why the building suddenly collapsed right now.